What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Omni-sensei here with What if an MMA fighter was reborn in Marvel as Dante Sparda? Devil May Cry. Part 2. If you enjoy this type of content, please gently slay the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Remember to check out the original story linked in the description. Without further ado, let's get into the legend of the Devil Hunters. Scott had to be shuttled to the infirmary after nearly getting his head taken off, and the rest of the spars went as expected. I held back considerably, but most of the kids were not nearly as good as Cyclops. So Logan insisted they wore thick padding before they started sparring with me. I took my time with each student, testing them and getting a feel for their techniques and style, while Logan yelled from the side, pointing out their mistakes. Bobby Drake was a close second to Cyclops in technique, overall physical fitness, and skill. His style blended karate and boxing, seamlessly flowing through attacks. I ended our fight with a grab and judo takedown, but I offered him my hands afterward. Coupled with his mutant power of cryokinesis, he'd be formidable if he wasn't holding back. My first somewhat dangerous fight was with Pyro, a skinny, pale kid with greasy hair and a vicious smirk on his face. When he stepped onto the arena, he pulled out his lighter and sparked it. An orb of fire gathered above his hand, earning a nervous look from me. "You never set the rules," he quipped. Logan was about to speak up before I interrupted. "Nah, it's fine," I said. "It won't make that much of a difference." Logan considered my request for a moment before he nodded in agreement. The area around the arena was cleared out, and I stood across from Pyro, shirtless, my lean, muscular physique on display. It earned a few whistles from the girls below, and I egged Pyro on. "Whenever you're ready, lighter boy." Pyro unleashed a wave of fire with a grunt. I sidestepped the stream with basic footwork, and with 2 quick strides, I ate up half the distance between us. Pyro swung his hand out, spreading the flames, hoping to cut me off, but I leaped forward with a flip and came down with a vicious axe kick that nearly took Pyro's head off. He cut the fire off, rapidly retreating as he lobbed fireball after fireball at me. But I juked and weaved through them all, leaning heavily into the instinctive mastery that my new martial arts skill and personal experience gave me. Pyro crumbled to the ground when I punched him in the liver, bringing an abrupt end to our fight. Things got more interesting from that point on. Only 2 students were left, and Logan allowed both to fight me with their powers. Fighting Shadowcat, aka Kitty Pryde, was an exercise in frustration. She was superhumanly fast, acrobatic, and could phase through most of my attacks while landing glancing blows at me. They barely dipped into my HP, so I didn't mind. I was more interested in what I could learn from her. When I got tired of her, I went in for the kill, mixing in feint with blistering fast strikes. All it had taken was one missed grab on her part. A kick to the sciatic nerve had her limping and yelling uncle. The last big fight of that session was with Colossus, and he was a wall I was uncertain I could topple without using my abilities. His metallic skin reflected light, his large muscles rippled, and he towered over me, standing at 7 foot 5 inches. "Kick his ass, Colossus," Kitty hollered from the sidelines, still holding her injured leg with a pout. "I apologize for what is to come, but you won't win," the gentle giant announced. "We shall see," I said. The moment he stepped onto the arena, I summoned rebellion. He came charging at me, moving startlingly fast for somebody his size, and swiped at me with an open palm. I charged at him, transforming rebellion into Ophion. I pumped it full of demon energy, switching it into a grappling hook, and fired it at Colossus's face. My body dropped into a slide, perfectly slipping through his massive legs. I yanked, backed with demonic strength, but the giant didn't budge. At most, I just chafed him. I switched Ophion to a sword, parrying the swipe that came a second later. But it still sent me spinning. "Just how strong are you?" I grunted as I sprung to my feet. I ducked under a haymaker next, and stepped under a slow front kick. I pulled on Colossus's meaty right bicep, unbalancing him as much as possible, and wrapped my leg around his only rooted leg. My muscles strained as I tugged his hand even harder, causing the giant to pitch over. But he caught himself before he fell to the floor. I clicked my tongue at the failed maneuver and swung at his jaw with a burst shooting out of my left elbow. It went off like a bomb. My hand pulled back, broken in 3 places, while Colossus stumbled back, his eyes glazed over. God, that hurt like a bitch, I thought as I cradled my hand. A burst brought me several paces back to avoid any retaliatory strikes, having learned my lesson from my fight with the concrete bruiser. Angel regeneration pulsed, healing my broken bones. I flashed forward with a 720 kick next to keep the pressure on, but the big guy was ready for me. He raised his forearm to tank my hit, and my shin splintered. With a grunt, I summoned rebellion to tank the uppercut that I saw his body telegraph. The blow caught the flat of the blade, and I was thrown, sword and body, out of the arena. There was a resounding wave of applause when I landed on my feet and subsequently tripped, but I still caught myself. Go figure, landing on a busted leg was not a good idea. My only consolation was angel regeneration, which was already healing my tibia. When I looked up, I noticed the cheers were not for me. They were for Colossus. Everyone from Bobby to Kitty and Pyro congratulated him. Only Jean rushed to my side immediately. "Are you okay?" she said with no small amount of worry in her voice. She'd reappeared just in time to watch me get my ass hooped by the metal giant. "Never better," I smiled. I knew he was strong, but I didn't realize it was that ridiculous. Colossus can lift 50 tons above his head. You were never going to win in a straight-up fistfight. 50 tons, I coughed. Damn. Never say never. I had him on the ropes for a second there. Only because he was going easy on you, Jean pointed out, and I conceded after some thought. Even I don't think my regeneration can handle being hit by a 50-ton haymaker. Looking over at Colossus and the crowd of kids around him, I decided to be a proper sportsman. "What are you doing?" Jean asked as I started walking toward the giant. "My job," I called back to her. "I'm an instructor. I have to be the bigger man, even if I'm a little salty. At least put on a shirt first," she demanded, and I turned back, noticing the slight flush on her face. "I don't hear anyone else complaining," I shrugged. The crowd parted as I walked up to Colossus, every mutant in the room on edge. Scott had ensured I had a reputation the night I arrived here, and my display reinforced his narrative that I was a monster. But that didn't mean I couldn't change people's minds. Sure, I was an asshole who was pissed because he was dealt the wrong hand in the afterlife. But as I'd said earlier, I didn't want my new life to be one never-ending fight. I was at the X Mansion to train, get into Jean's good graces, and work out a contract with S.H.I.E.L.D., not make more enemies. "Good fight," I said, offering my hand to Colossus. The teen considered my hand ponderously before he received it. "I haven't been pushed that hard in a long time." "Can't say the same," I said truthfully. "But I'll tell you this much, that's the first time I've broken my hand in 3 places from punching somebody in the face," I laughed. "You're a lot less monstrous than Scott makes you out to be," he rumbled. "I imagined you'd be angrier at the loss. I don't pretend I don't have a past, but I'm a lot less violent than people think," I said, surveying the room full of mutants. Kitty Pryde huffed and folded her arms. "He's still a big meanie. Couldn't even take it easy on me. If I'd been going any easier, I'd be fighting in slow motion," I retorted. "You're not just as slick as you think you are, but don't worry, that's why I am here. We'll be running drills until all of you don't completely suck," I announced, then nodded in Colossus's direction. Present company excluded, of course. Logan clapped his hands together and joined the group of mutants. "Now that you've gotten that out of your system, can I finally get on with the lesson of the day?" Training for the kids mostly consisted of cardio, flexibility drills, high-intensity interval training, weightlifting, and live combat. All that didn't happen every day for them, but I damn made sure it did for me. With my busted angel regeneration and meditation, I didn't need the off days or downtime. I made the most of every minute I had in the gym because I understood that I was on a clock. The next incursion was happening in a month, and after dealing with that, I had to negotiate with Fury. I was nowhere near ready for either, so I was pulling all of the stops. I started drilling angel and demon energy manipulation for 2 hours every night, as well as practicing with knives, batons, axes, and even the bow staff. I hoped I would be close to the adept tier when I finally had the red orbs to buy my weapons. It wasn't until the end of the first week that I saw the danger room. It was a large white room without blemish, with hundreds of tiny projectors sticking out of the wall. Beast walked in dressed in a lab coat and had a thick set of glasses dropping down from his cat-like face as he stared into a tablet, humming. "Ah, Dante. Here to book a session in the danger room for your class. Yeah, it might have only been a week, but I think they're ready, I said. But I'm not only here for them. You're here about the combat avatars, Beast said, meeting my eyes. It's no secret that I'll be out of here in a few weeks. I have enemies waiting for me, and I'd prefer to be prepared for them. I took a step closer. What sort of enemies? The kind that would give your nightmares, I said. What are you going up against? Beast frowned. You might not believe me if I told you. It's not exactly scientific. Tell me anyway. Demons. Beast looked a bit taken aback. The professor did tell me about your peculiar heritage and mission. I folded my arms and feigned offense. I didn't think the professor would reveal what I'd mentioned in confidence. And for the record, I never confirmed or denied who my parents were. He meant no offense, Beast said. It's just due diligence to inform all of our staff of the more peculiar characteristics of our students. It's fine, I waved, but I should remind you that I am no student. Before Beast had the chance to counter, I continued speaking. So, how does this danger room thing work? 30 minutes later, I was standing in a facsimile of New York City with 10 pudgy ceramic cherubs flying with crossbows and shields. I summoned my guns and spun them with a flourish. The cherubs screeched as one and let a rip, letting crossbow bolts fly. I twisted, turned, flipped, and rapid-fired ebony and ivory. My initial flurry took out several 3 of the 10 flyers, and I backtracked and strafed aggressively as I took shot after shot. The cherubs quickly caught on, spreading out to make it more difficult for me to pick them off. But it didn't help much. I ducked into an alleyway and let a rip as soon as a cherub floated in, chasing after me. I took out the other one, hanging back, watching the fight from afar. A quick demonic burst threw me into the other side of the wall, dodging a spray of bolts from a pair trying to flank me. Ebony and Ivory spat thunder, and their bodies dropped. Only 3 left. 2 bombs dropped in from above me, rapidly flickering. Another quick burst carried me out of the alley in time to escape the explosion. I came up firing Ebony and Ivory at the spot in the sky where the bombs had dropped from, clipping one cherub in the wing. Its head burst from another before it hit the ground, and the final 2 cherubs scattered. For a moment, I stood at the square, patiently waiting for the ambush I knew was coming. A flickering bomb came flying at me from one direction, and a spray of arrows from the other. I juked, weaved, and burst out of the firing line of the arrows before summoning rebellion and punting the incoming bomb at the enthusiastic archer. I saw the surprise on its face as I darted at the bomb thrower, who went into overdrive since it was the last man standing. More bombs rushed my way, all of which I deflected and burst out of range of. The bombs went off in the distance like fireworks on New Year's. It was moving erratically, looping in the air, making it damn hard to finish off the exercise. At least, that was until I fired a shot to its left that made it back to the right, where Ophion was waiting on it. I yanked it down hard with demon pull, slamming it into the ground before I pulled it close and kicked its head off. A wild grin spread across my face when I finished. I'd barely broken a sweat. Let's go again, I yelled to Beast. But double numbers. 2 weeks into my training, I saw my skill progression with the various weapons I'd started using wane. So I started incorporating them into my duel with the kids. Only Jean, Kitty, Colossus, and surprisingly, Cyclops could offer me a challenge. Fighting Jean was as painful as Colossus. In this universe, she was fairly decent at using her telekinetic abilities. So every spar was a fight to overwhelm her with bursts in unpredictable ways and move so fast she couldn't keep track of me. Because once she did, our fights were over in an instant. Strategically distracting her with throwing knives was one of the only ways I could stay in her hand when she did eventually catch up to me. Instead of trying to hold my entire body down, Jean learned early on it was smarter to hold my waist, neck, back, or some other body part one could exert my strength with. In our time together, Jean also improved leaps and bounds. She got better at split-second and minute manipulation of psychic energy, and she was often the last person I saw before I went to bed, much to Scott's chagrin. We also joked around a bunch and talked about her past, nothing and everything. Slowly, I began to build a rapport with her, and she was every bit as bright and strong-willed as you'd expect from a heroine of a popular Marvel comic series. Time seemed to fly by when I fought and hung out with her, and it was still surreal to remember that she was just a picture on a page to me and most of my universe up until a few months ago. During my 3rd week of training, I decided to kick things into hypergear. I was up hundreds of pounds on all my lifts, and my training at the danger room was getting more complicated and frantic. I'd spammed burst so much that I knew I was close to reaching the upper limits of the basic tier. My control over Ophion was also getting masterful. I practiced swinging around the city, yanking enemies close, pulling myself to them, and using them as a tool to incapacitate. I rounded the week off by cornering Wolverine and demanding an actual spar from the combat master of the X-Men. When I'd initially approached him about the training he'd promised, he pointed out that he said no such thing. I'd asked for it, and he'd answered my question with another. That left me slack-jawed for a moment before I recovered. I pointed out that I needed to see where I stacked against a true master, and the flattery finally got Logan into the arena. Throughout my entire time teaching with Logan, he'd only used me as promised, a demonstration partner for all his strikes, parries, throws, maneuvers, and submissions. And he hadn't gone easy on me, but it was nothing my regeneration could not handle. His sessions, however, cemented Logan's reputation as one of the most skilled fighters in the Marvel Universe. He demonstrated flawless mastery of multiple martial arts and a technical understanding that bothered genius, even if the man couldn't explain it in so many words. We were in the arena alone. Our only audience was the teaching staff watching from behind the cameras. Logan was a simple shirt with an old katana, and I clutched Rebellion, shifting nervously. Logan had decades of experience with me, and his healing factor and endurance meant he wouldn't be tapping out anytime soon. I was stronger than when I first arrived, but Logan had bones made of adamantium. "Come on, bub," Logan said with a come-hither gesture. "I haven't got all day." Instead of trading barbs with him, I let my actions speak for me. A potent burst brought me within striking distance of Logan, and I slashed at him. He raised his blade to block the attack, but I unsummoned Rebellion, ducking into an athletic roll. Midway through, I summoned 5 of the then fingers of Orochi and pelted Logan's back. "Arg," he grunted and swung around. I leaned back, dodging the cut by mere inches. A knuckle duster came out next, and I punched with a burst. The blow did not move Logan, but he definitely felt it. His legs angled out, but he was slightly slower than he would have otherwise been. The blow swept by me as I used clever footwork to glide past Logan, using my adept skill, but before I could lay into him, his elbow shot out, blocking my liver shot, but my other hand was wide open, and it summoned Ophion. I fired as I stepped back with Demon Pull. It latched onto Logan's leg, but before I could yank him off his feet, the 5'5" monster batted the claw away with the flat of his blade. The move stole a chunk of flesh, but Logan surged forth anyway, unleashing a flurry of strikes. I summoned Rebellion to deflect them, but the strength of it pushed me back. I was strong but not nearly strong enough, and Logan's swordplay was miles ahead of mine. Even though he should be in crippling pain because of the fingers of Orochi, I made up for it by rapidly repositioning Rebellion. Because of the nature of my power, I was never truly locked in a position. With a shift and a pivot, I could attack from a whole new angle, switching my sword for a bowstaff or axe. And that was what I did. Logan scored more cuts on me than I did him after sharpening my unpredictable style against him. I decided to get serious. A burst of demonic energy put some distance between me and Logan, and I fired at him using ebony and ivory. Logan charged me, deflecting a chunk of my shots, tanking the others with his arms, legs, stomach, and head. "Quit hiding behind your guns like a pansy," Logan roared as he leaped at me with his sword, giving me the opening I'd been looking for. Burst carried me forward faster than Logan could react, and I slammed Rebellion into his gut just as he came down. The acceleration and the suddenness of the strike were powerful enough to throw him back, and I followed after him, stabbing him over and over again with a furious roar. My hands moved so fast that my blade became a blur. Trillion stabs. Logan was barely standing when I was done, and I was panting. Large parts of his chest and stomach muscles had been hacked off, leaving his ribcage exposed. Still, Logan didn't even look like he minded. Right before my eyes, muscle tissue regenerated, and flesh covered them. "You're better than I give you credit for," he said, tossing his katana aside and ripping off what was left of his shirt. "You've earned my claws." I gulped. I went on and did it. Logan gingerly pulled the fingers of Orochi, slowing him down, and leaped at me with his claws bared. I ducked to the left, slightly winded, but he followed closely behind me, pivoting and sprinting a second after he landed. Logan had gone from barely keeping up with my speed to outpacing me in all categories. His claws moved like a hurricane, shredding everything in sight. Sections of the arena were covered in adamantine claw marks. I didn't even try clashing blades with him. I knew Rebellion or Ophion wouldn't survive it, so I focused on keeping my distance, strategically using bursts, and lashing out with punches and kicks. But my demon energy bottomed eventually. 8/350. I realized that only after Burst's command yielded no instant transportation. My heart was at my throat as Logan's claws inched closer to my neck. In a Herculean feat of effort, I twisted and bent as rivers of sweat poured from my soaked tank top. I tapped into my demon energy pool when I saw that I would not make it out entirely unscathed. And then something happened. A wave of energy surged from every pore in me, exploding in a sustained flame of red and black. Logan leaped back, digging his claw into the arena floor, surprised by my sudden transformation. A notification flashing onto my screen confirmed what I'd already suspected. Congratulations. You've unlocked Demon Dodge, Basic. Increase your next attack by 2x for 5 seconds. Costs 20 demon energy, schmuck me. This was not how I imagined learning this skill, but I wasn't about to go looking a gift horse in the mouth. So I surged ahead, eating up the distance between me and Logan suddenly before my 5 seconds ran out. The man reacted with a double claw strike, which I vaulted over and came down with a summoned Rebellion, twisting like a top with my blade extended. My attack shredded his neck and most of his upper body, but by the end of it, the flame cloaking me was gone. Logan let out a frustrated roar. A kick slammed into me the moment my legs touched the ground, ragdolling me sideways. My body came to a stop at the very edge of the arena, dizzy and groaning from the pain. But I blinked just in time to see a bloody Wolverine coming down on me with his claws extended. I had one of two options: roll out the arena and concede, or dig even deeper and bounce back somehow. I might have been out of demonic energy, but I still had over half of my angel energy left. I hadn't needed to heal often in this fight, so I had the energy to spend and experiment. Pulling on the wiry angel energy, I guided it through my body, not force it, and it wrapped around my entire body. Logan crashed into me, but I was already gone, standing halfway across the arena, my body bleeding blue vapor. Logan's body bounced over the arena edge and came to a stop outside bounds, which technically meant I won the fight. I let out a sigh of relief, instantly deflating. That fight took a lot out of me. Good work, kid, Logan said as he stepped back into the arena. You made me fight seriously. He cracked his neck. Been a while since that has happened. You're not half bad. Let's do this again in a few days. I fell on my ass as Logan walked off, weariness seeping into my very bones. I read the description of the new skill I'd just acquired. Angel Dodge phase through limbo, allowing Dante to evade an additional distance and render him invulnerable to attacks. That looked about right. At least it did confirm my suspicions. Limbo was real in this universe, and I'd have to deal with it eventually. But for now, I focused on the outcome of the fight. I'd barely come out ahead. I had a feeling Wolverine would not fall for my tactics again. I needed new moves. Logan's adamantine claws were just impossible to deal with. I needed to figure out an effective way to neutralize them in our next fight. I took one final look at my status before I continued my training. Name: Dante Sparda Species, Nephilim Class, None HP, 100/570 SP, 340/560 AE, 50/350 DE, 60/360 Strength, 32 Dexterity, 35 Endurance, 56 Vitality, 57 Angelic Energy, 35 Demonic Energy. 36 I put my plan into motion at the X-Men mansion at the start of the 4th week. Jean needed to understand how much danger she was truly in. After long sparring sessions with her, which mostly constituted her flinging me around and me breaking her telekinetic hold with sheer force, I took her hand. "Do you trust me, Jean?" She smirked. "I barely know you." I rolled my eyes. "Don't pout just because you can't see inside my mind, Jean. We've been hanging out for weeks, and I've told you more about my past than anyone." She chewed her lips, regarding me carefully. "I'm flattered, Dante, but I have a... Get your mind out of the gutter," I chuckled. "Scotty boy can have you all for himself. I prefer them a bit older." She blushed, yanking away her arm. "I'm glad you do. I would have hated losing my favorite sparring partner." I leaned in closer. "Sparring partners, huh? That all we are?" Why did you ask me if I trusted you? She asked, tucking her fiery red hair behind her ear. I want to show you something, I said. It's a new ability I've been working on. Whatever happens, I want you to remember that you're perfectly safe and can trust me. I reached out for her hand again. Oh, okay, she said, carefully taking my arm. I pulled her in with an amused smirk and activated Paradise Simulacrum. Suddenly, Jean and I were standing on one of the thousands of floating stone platforms that make up the simulacrum. Crimson clouds swirled overhead, and an endless sea lapped below. Jean stumbled away from my grasp, completely confused. Dante, she began with some trembling in her voice. Where the hell are we? It was the first time I heard Jean curse. It didn't quite sound right coming out of her mouth. I spread my hands across enigmatically. Welcome to my realm. You made this? Well, my father did, I said. I think. This was where I disappeared on the plane, and probably one of the only places on the planet where the old coot couldn't listen in on our conversation. She frowned. You mean the professor? I nodded. Have you given any thought to my comment about you having the powers of a god? Her eyes still lapped around the simulacrum, trying to wrap her mind around what she witnessed. I told Scott about it, she said with a hint of guilt. He thinks you're trying to trick me. My eyes went wide. She did what? Of all the... I took a deep breath, bottling my anger. I told you that in confidence, I said slowly. I didn't expect you to share it with Scott, of all people. You must have known how he'd react. You didn't also tell him about my heritage, did you? Of course I didn't. She looked hurt at the insinuation, but I wanted her to feel that way. Maybe next time, she'd think twice before blabbing. Don't give me that look, I said. You betrayed my trust. Scott is my boyfriend, she said. When he asked what we talked about, I had to be honest. I sighed. Teenage love. She had no idea what sort of pain she was in for. Oh well, I couldn't blame her. I expected too much. Don't tell Scott what I'm about to say next, or tell him, but understand that you'll be forcing the professor's hand if he reads Scott's mind. And he seems like the type that wants his puppets marching down the path he's set out for them. Jean frowned, again with the dig at the professor. How can you say that after everything he's done for you? Done for me? I raised a brow. He kidnapped me from a fight that his enemies forced into me and made me teach in a school that hates me because of my past. I could have been in Alaska by now, set up with a new house, endless woodland, and all of the training equipment money could buy. But Xavier just had to be the damn hero. I wanted to tell Jean all that, but I settled for a more diplomatic answer. I'm grateful, but I'm not blind, I said. The professor probably didn't tell you, but he didn't exactly accept me into the school. He's letting me train until he can help me broker a deal with the government. Only I'm pretty sure he's not made that call yet. Nor will he. The professor doesn't make promises he can't keep, and he doesn't lie either. He could have reached out to his government contact at any point with telepathy. I circled Jean. Heck, with Cerebro, he can reach the entire globe with his mind. How do you know that? Jean asked, to which I just rolled my eyes. As usual, you're focusing on the wrong things. The better question is, why hasn't he done what he promised? Could it be that he's really trying to help me? Or is the more likely answer that he is buying time to break my mental shield so that he can seal away my powers like he's done to you? Jean's face went pale as she connected the dots. What? No, you can't. You can't really think the professor is capable of that. Xavier is likely one of the most powerful telepaths alive, I shrugged. If anyone is powerful and egotistical enough to shackle a god, it's him. Jean shook her head. You're being ridiculous. The professor has known me since I was a child. He'd never. You're out of line. I'm asking you to open your eyes, Jean, I said a bit forcefully. He has the motive, opportunity, and the power to pull it off, and the evidence is staring you in the face. What are you talking about? Ever since I talked to you about the seal, your power has been growing, haven't they? Jean had a look of dread creeping in, but she remained unconvinced. I've been getting more training since you started teaching, and Logan introduced the new training system. You've trained a lot of time before. Why is your current situation any different? I asked. You might want to deny it, but I know you've felt its presence. Stop it, Jean whispered, but I pushed. A bird of cosmic fire and endless psychic energy. You might have not yet heard its voice, but you felt the weight of its presence. Jean's face seemed to twist and turn the longer I spoke, realization slowly seeping in. Stop it, she lashed out with her arm, her telekinetic wail, crushing a distant floating wall behind us. No, this is all you. You're putting ideas in my head. Holy shit. My breath hitched. The demonic energy in the air was slowly filtering away. Jean's hair was beginning to whip, though there was no wind. That's a lie, and you know it. I didn't back down. I needed to push through. Otherwise, she'd turtle up, and I wouldn't be able to break through to her before I had to leave. This power didn't come from nowhere. You've always been this powerful. Phoenix has always been there. Somebody just made you forget. No. Her voice came out weaker this time. I took slow, cautious steps and held her in my arms. Calm down, Jean, I urged. You're safe, and he cannot get to you. Not here. For a long moment, Jean stayed in my arms. She did not let go until her breathing normalized, and she looked up at me. I could still see the doubt in those eyes. I was asking too much of her. No sane person would condemn a man she's known all of her life based on the words of a killer, even if he was a friend. She had to see his betrayal by herself. I know this is hard to swallow, and I won't ask you to believe me without one final bit of evidence. Xavier is going to try to break my mental barrier. Her eyes went wide. If that didn't convince her, nothing would. Jean was slow to respond. You're going to provoke him, she said. Your mental resistance is admirable, but even I can push past it if I try enough. It's suicide. That might have not been true a few weeks ago, but now that she was aware of the Phoenix and her limiters were slowly coming off, Jean's abilities were soaring to new heights. It's not, I said, because you'll be a couple of rooms over and will come to my rescue before Baldy cracks my head open like an egg. Jean pursed her lips. That sounds risky. Oh, it is. But you'll have nothing to worry about if the professor is not guilty. However, if you're really worried, you could help me work on my mental resistance. Jean made a face. I'll help, but not because I think the professor would ever do that. I just don't want to see you get hurt. I nodded. Completely reasonable. Jean twisted her fingers, looking down before she met my gaze. Phoenix is what you called what's inside my head. What can you tell me about it? I blinked. My devil's eye tells me it's the prime manifestation of the universal force of life, creation, and destruction. It is immortal, indestructible, and predates even the darkness at the beginning of the universe. Wow, you weren't kidding when you said God, but whatever this Phoenix is, it's beyond that, isn't it? I would imagine so, I said, trying not to give too much away. If I know my classical literature about gods and deities, she'll likely be pissed at you and Charles for sealing her off for all of these years. Jean bit her lip. Why wouldn't she be? How do I fix this? I shrugged. I'd start with getting rid of the seal. Jean looked at me like I was crazy. You want to unshackle a creature powerful enough to wipe out galaxies? She was going to get out anyways, I said. We might as well be the ones to do it. Maybe she'll be grateful. In the classics, the gods are not exactly known for their benevolence, Jean said with more than a little fear in her voice. True, but we're not exactly helpless, I said. I know a sorceress who might be able to help us. She blinked. You mean like she uses magic in real life? I quirked a brow. That is what sorceresses tend to do. Why is this surprising? You've seen magic before. What? When? I gestured to myself. How do you think my devil eye or any of my other abilities work? Magic. I just assumed. Jean trailed off and regarded me with a new sense of wonder and worry. Jean Elaine Gray is speechless, I laughed. Never thought I'd see the day. Jean's face circled through half a dozen emotions before it finally settled on outrage. She folded her arms and huffed, shoving me with a light telekinetic force. I chuckled again, glad to see that the news hasn't made you any less of a hard ass. She looked like she was about to shove me again before I raised my hands in surrender. You know you'll be trapped here forever if I go over the edge. Don't think I will take it easy on you during training. She huffed and floated to the next platform. I didn't have the heart to tell her right away that she was headed in the wrong direction. After our little heart-to-heart, I led Jean to the base of the stone seal on Dante's memory and shattered it. I hadn't expected any new memories to follow, but how wrong I was. I saw visions of Dante's childhood growing up in a large mansion alongside his brother and mother. According to the story Sparda, a white-haired regal man told him. He and a handful of other demons came to this reality through the help of Belesco, a powerful human sorcerer. For his part in helping them cross over, the archdemons gave him a cup of their blood and granted him immortality. He, in turn, used his newfound immortality and demonic power to conquer Limbo and abduct a few human women whom he raped and had children with. Most of the archdemons scattered throughout the stars, setting up on fresh planets rather than battling each other for a backwater like Earth. But Sparda was content to stay. Weary of war and slaughter, he decided to act as guardian to Earth and a check for Belasco. He didn't wish for any more of his fellow demons to make the journey through to this reality. Over time, Belasco built a society of half-demon hybrids in Limbo and approached Sparda about moving them to the surface to repopulate the Earth. But Sparda refused him. He'd come to care for the humans and other creatures that occupied this world. He knew what would happen to it if he let Belasco loose. So in a fight that lasted days, Sparda put Belasco in his place. None of his demon-human hybrids were ever to cross the veil. For centuries, Belasco obeyed, biding his time, slowly growing his army, waiting for the perfect opportunity. It presented itself nearly 20 years ago when something came through Belasco's long-dead teleportation circle. It was an angel, and the forces of Limbo immediately attacked her. She wielded shifting weapons and energy constructs and managed to beat back most of Belasco's forces until the sorcerer himself stepped forward. He put her down fairly quickly, but did not kill her, marveling at her power. He figured children made from his seed and her genetics could grow powerful enough to rival Sparda one day and let him invade the surface. But the legendary Dark Knight put an end to his plans before they formed. Sparda took Eva to the surface world, and in no time, they fell in love and had 2 children, Virgil and Dante. Desperate for revenge, Belasco sent a message to Mundus, the conqueror and former king of the demon world. He had a grudge against Sparda, and was furious when he discovered that Sparda had taken an angel as a wife. He and Belasco invaded their home, killed Eva, and sealed Sparda after the Dark Knight successfully hid his sons. Mundus left Earth after the deal, leaving Belasco to do with it as he pleased. Now, only the sorcerers of Sanctum Sanctorium hold back his forces. Oh hell, what the hell did Shin get me into now? I thought I was done with all of Dante's crap. Now, you're telling me there's an entire dimension of demons that were probably after me. Congratulations. You've triggered your second quest from your god and patron, Shin the Avaricious. Free the Dark Knight Sparda, kill Mundus, the 4 other archdemons roaming the Marvel universe, and wipe out Belasco's army. Hand over the Belasco to Shin and submit control of Limbo. Reward: 2 advanced class tokens, 1,000 stat points, a world key, and 1 legendary tier item from the shop. Note from Shin: you found the other thing I wanted. Thank heavens you're not completely slow. The Paradise Simulacrum could have gone undiscovered for years if you never thought to combine both of your energies. P.S. Do more of that, by the way. You didn't need to be a genius to explain why Shin wanted Limbo. He wanted to get his hand on Belasco's bullshit multiversal summon magic. It had been powerful enough to transport several archdemons and an angel from several multiverses. No doubt, Ileana had something to do with this. Thinking about the entire ordeal gave me a small migraine. But after I broke it down, I realized it wasn't that big of a deal. I could end Belasco and his army with a wave of my hand if I find the power, mind, or space stone. As for the remaining 4 archdemons, they'd get their due in time. The only task I was slightly nervous about was saving Sparda. I kept myself from getting too excited about the rewards, remembering who they were from. If my plan worked out, I'd not need to rely on Shin's charity to get stronger. Are you okay? Jean's voice pulled me back to the platform. I was covered in sweat and slightly unsteady on my feet. Dante, do you need to sit down? She asked. What did you see? I let out a dark chuckle. I officially know where I come from, and it's no surprise. I'm half demon like I told you. I knew I was technically lying to Jean, but I couldn't fully trust her. She was a fence-sitter until she made up her mind about the professor. Ooh, she sounded slightly disappointed, so I decided to give her more. I have a family out there, apparently, I said, folding my arms. I will have to look for them when all this is over. It's good to hear you have someone, Jean said. They could be looking for you. A humorous chuckle escaped my lips. Doubt it, I said. Let's get to the mental drills. Jean's opening attack cracked open my mental shield like a walnut. My adept mental resistance lasted all of 5 minutes against her. I was gasping, gripping the side of my head, when the first session was over. Need a break? Jean asked in an innocent voice. Wouldn't dream of it, I said, spiking angel regeneration. The intense pain faded, but the headache lingered for a minute longer before we went at it repeatedly. We worked on my mental resistance stat for hours, slowly grinding it past the initial stage until I could resist Jean for up to 15 minutes before she wore me down. Each time she got through my walls, she didn't thankfully linger, only skimming my bare surface thoughts. I slowly learned to be guarded around her, though I didn't intend for it. Still, Jean noticed easily enough. I concentrated on the mission, focusing on strange obsessions like how much the punching bags in the gym weighed and how S.H.I.E.L.D. would react when they met me. "You know, you don't have to go through with this," Jean said. "The fact that you're willing to endure this much pain tells me you believe the professor is guilty. But do you believe it, though?" The look on her face was telling. "You have to see it with your own eyes. I know you love him like a father, and you're struggling with this. I would need irrefutable proof if I were your shoes. The occasional migraine is a small price to pay for your peace of mind." Jean didn't say much after that, and neither did I. We spent the next few hours slowly building up my mental resistance, and just as my skill was about to expire, I told Jean the particulars of my plan to expose the professor. "You're going to call S.H.I.E.L.D.?" Jean yelled, staring at me as if I was a crazy person. My mental shield was up, so she didn't see how much fun I was having at her expense. "I'm going to have you do what the professor promised 3 weeks back. Didn't you say they were after you for killing their agent?" Jean brought up a fair point. "That was a mistake, and the agent was most likely dirty. Besides, after I go through with my plan, they'll be crazy not to try and negotiate with me. Are you going to tell me the particulars of this crazy plan of yours?" "As soon as we deal with the professor." Jean let out a frustrated huff and sighed. "What do you want me to do?" "The professor needs to be off kilter when I provoke him. So we do that by letting him think that S.H.I.E.L.D. has caught on to his little secret. Won't he suspect you of setting this up somehow?" "Not if his perfect Jean does it in my stead," I smirked. "Here's what I want you to do." Jean POV my stomach turned as I strolled down a busy street with Scott, Kitty, and a de-transformed Piotr. It was Sunday, our only day off from the daily training and classes, and we mutants that could leave the mansion loved spending that time in town. We typically caught a movie or visited a park, but today, everyone was in the mood for a burger. The thought of eating nearly made me barf. I hated secrets and lying and felt crazy even entertaining what Dante was suggesting, but he'd never been wrong ever. It's not only me who noticed it. Logan never corrected him when we were training. Piotr listened to him, Ileana loved him, and his weird devils I revealed secrets he couldn't possibly know. He could instantly tell what part of Africa Storm was from just one look at her. And he knew that Logan had a Japanese wife once. If I hadn't seen a more casual side of him, I'd be downright terrified of Dante. But after seeing the pain he'd gone through just to prove that the professor had altered my mind somehow, I had to give him a chance, no matter how uncomfortable that made me feel. He was also right about the presence of the Phoenix. Until now, I'd always chalked it up to another downside of being psychic, but recent events have convinced me otherwise. My powers were growing as Dante said, and I was inclined to believe that the Phoenix was the cause of it. The entire thing honestly sounded like the plot of a cheesy fantasy movie, but I couldn't ignore the time differential when we came out of Dante's realm or Dante's claim about the professor's brainwashing other mutants. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was tallying up. A quick chat with Logan also backed up Dante's claim about the deal with the professor. Provoking the professor obviously wasn't the route I would have gone, but I was desperate to prove Dante wrong. There had to be an explanation for everything that had happened, right? If it meant going along with this, then that was what I had to do. I couldn't afford to entertain the alternative. "Something on your mind, babe?" Scott asked. "She's been different since her last spar with that asshole," he thought. "Just feeling a bit under the weather," I muttered, folding my arms. "Mind if I stop to make a call at a payphone?" "Just use my cell," Scott offered. I still got minutes on it. We came to a stop in front of a small mom-and-pop diner. I'd had my eye on the place before all of this started. Now, the thought of it made me want to hurl. I shook my head. "I've got some change I need to get rid of anyway." Scott frowned, and I sensed his dread. Could she be no? "Don't go there, Scott. She can hear you." I held his hand and forced a smile. "I'll only be a minute. I just need some time to myself." Scott sensed my unease, but let go anyway. He kissed me on the cheek. "All right, babe." He joined Piotr and Kitty, who had the sense not to comment on our relationship troubles, though their thoughts on it were not exactly a mystery. Pyotr thought I was changing, and Kitty was jealous because I was getting hot and heavy with the new beefcake. I resisted the urge to point out Dante was about 5 years too old for her. I found the nearest payphone and slipped my quarter in, dialing the phone number that Dante gave me. I swallowed as the line connected and went to voicemail. Hey, this is Gemma calling for Donnie. I got your number from a guy I ran into at a party. He was a little drunk, but he swears you make the best IDs in the States. I need to take a long vacation. Can you help me? My hands were shaking a little when I hung up. Vague enough to arouse interest, but not obvious enough to clue in whoever came looking that they'd been lured here. I thought using his dead friend's name to set a trap was a bit cold, but Dante just shrugged and said, "He's dead. He might as well be useful." By the time I made it to the diner, the knot in my stomach had grown even tighter. After the meal, Dante wanted me to pick up a few things at the convenience store, which made me nervous. Some rope, a ski mask, and some heavy-duty worker gloves. I did as told, despite the weird looks I got from everyone. It didn't help much that I knew exactly what they thought the entire time we were at the store. But I cared a lot more about the growing knot in my stomach than what they thought of me. I just wanted the entire thing to be over. Living in limbo was driving me insane. I bit the inside of my cheek nervously as the second Quellatrax invasion counted down. 11 hours, 56 minutes. Charles is cutting it really. And then I heard it. "The professor wants you," Aurora said to Jean, who was sitting in the den beside me, chewing her finger nervously. "I don't know what you did," she started, "but I've never seen him so unsettled." Jean opened her mouth but struggled with the words, so I held her hand. "I'll walk you." After raising a brow in my direction, Aurora picked up on the intimacy and went on about her business, thankfully. The walk up to Charles's office was tense, and I didn't need to be psychic to see that Jean was on edge. Things tended to fly when Jean got like that, so I tried to wriggle a smile from her with a joke, which in hindsight seemed in poor taste. "You look like you're the one about to get your brain stir-fried by a telepath, not me." Jean's face lost even more color. "This is not funny. Charles is like a father to me. He took me in after my parents' accident," she said weakly. "He's the only family I have left." I froze. I knew I was forgetting something crucial. One of Jean's parents might have survived the freak accident that supposedly orphaned her. The very same one that she had likely caused. Crap. I hadn't been sure about Jean's home situation, so I didn't ask. Proving to Jean that Charles had lied to her would have proven much simpler if we'd just gone for a drive to her childhood home. He would have been caught in an obvious lie he couldn't spin. Yet I felt that route would have proven far more devastating in the long run. The entire experience would have shattered her, learning that she not only caused one of her parents' deaths, but that the surviving one was likely so afraid that they let Professor X have her. Schmuck me. How the hell do I spin this? Jean stopped dead in her tracks and looked at me. "What's wrong?" I looked at my new friend, who'd suddenly transformed into a firebomb in my eyes. I didn't have to force the look of concern emerging on my face. "It's just hitting me," I said. "I'm asking the world of you, aren't I?" Jean's eyes turned misty. "No, you aren't. You're giving me a chance to get the truth, and are potentially saving billions of lives in the process. I hope you're wrong, but..." I felt a tightness in my chest. "Schmuck me. I have to make this right." But it was too late to turn back now. Telling right here, right now, could be just as bad as taking Jean on the trip. She could explode, and that work would have been for nothing. "You have people that still love you," I said. "Charles might have disappointed you, but that doesn't mean everyone will. We have a lot to talk about, Jean, but it has to be after we do this." She nodded mutely at me and stopped a few steps short of entering the professor's office. I slipped my hands into my pocket and hit the start button on the tape recorder I borrowed from Scott. Swallowing in a deep breath, I walked in. Charles was more panicked than I'd ever seen him, which meant a moderate wrinkle on his otherwise smooth face. "You're here," he spoke with a current of anger in his voice. "Where's Jean?" "She knows," I said with a finality. "I told her about what you did to her." Charles's eyes a little bit went wide. "I don't know what you're talking." "Cut the shit, Charles," I barked. "Don't try to bullshit me. My devil's eye sees through you. You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I asked, raising a brow. "So you didn't seal Jean's power and memories because you feared how powerful she could become." Charles tried not to react, but I could clearly see that he was flustered. "She's my ward. Why would I be afraid of her? I have no desire to control Jean's life." If anything, it is you who is hungry for her power. You've wormed your way into her life, and from what the students and staff tell me, you're angling for more than that. I laughed, striding up to the man who was glaring. You must have noticed it. Your binds are slowly becoming undone. Jean is getting more powerful. It won't be long before she'll be able to unravel your block with a simple mental flex. I wonder how long your routine will last in the face of the Phoenix. Charles set his jaw. A lesson for when next you threaten somebody, Dante. Make sure the events you're using as leverage occurred. I shook my head, somewhat impressed. Xavier was a better liar than I expected. That's how you want to play it? Then have it your way. I'll just tell Logan, Storm, and every last mutant what you did to Jean and possibly them before I leave. They'd never believe you. He narrowed his eyes. Maybe, but as you must have realized by now, I made it a point to prove to everyone here that I'm never wrong. They'll side with you, obviously, but they'll always wonder if I was right, I said ominously. Could the professor be as dangerous as Dante claims he is? Has he taken over our minds? Are there things we can't remember? Why are you doing this? Charles frowned. I've been nothing but kind to you. You poisoned Jean against me, and now the children. Kind. I scoffed. You judged me the second you met me and invaded my mind like it was the most natural thing in the world. You promised to contact S.H.I.E.L.D. and tried to keep me here with some Stockholm Syndrome bullshit. And if that wasn't bad enough, you made the person who vouched for you a liar. Do you realize what you've done by sealing Jean's powers? Continents will burn when the Phoenix gets loose and makes a beeline for you. Charles went a little pale. Surely you exaggerate. My eyes flashed red. My eyes do not lie, and they've seen it. You condemned me for being a killer. Well, your desperation to collect family like their dolls might make you an even bigger killer than me. When the Phoenix gets loose, she'll go on a murder spree that won't end with this solar system. Stars will die. Trillions will suffer. All because Charles Xavier wanted to play God. No, Charles muttered nervously. You're lying. I can still fix this. I got her under control once before. I will do it again, Charles said, suddenly finding his courage. And you're every bit as dangerous as I thought you'd be. The S.H.I.E.L.D. call, it was your doing, wasn't it? I shrugged. I wasn't going to lose my chance to negotiate from a position of strength. I foresaw your betrayal. My eyes see all, I said, playing deeper into the mystical red ice bullshit. You couldn't help yourself, could you? It's no wonder how you grew up alone and afraid. You've been desperate for love your whole life. Oof. I may have gone too far using comic knowledge on him like that, but I really had to push the demon angle. And that did it. Charles shook in his wheelchair, seething. He stared straight at me. You had no right to go looking in my past. His rage was a quiet one, his voice barely above a whisper. I fell to one knee, gasping out in shock as his alpha-level mind slammed into mine. You claim to see it all, he said. Tell me, did you foresee your paltry defense will stand up against the might of the most powerful mind on earth? I writhed as Charles slowly drilled deeper, savoring every mental twist as he penetrated my mental fortress, inch by inch. It was hell. Charles was on another level. Jean's mind simply did not compare. Blood started pouring out of my mouth, eyes and ears. You will say nothing, he growled, because you are nothing. I considered only sealing off your demonic abilities. But now I see that I was too kind. Charles wheeled himself forward until he was looking down at me. I gasped, choking down blood. Barely able to think clearly to manage an action I'd done so many times it was practically second nature, summon my guns. This was far worse than anything I could have freaking imagined. Where the hell was Jean? As the seconds dragged on and the pain mounted, I came to the only conclusion that made sense. Jean had made her choice, and she chose Xavier. I will lock you up in your mind and hand you over to them as an apology, Xavier growled. They'll slice you open and put you back together just to see how you work. And no one will come looking for you, because they won't remember you, he said. See, I might surround myself with people because I want a family, but you'll never find one because of what you are, Dante, a sniveling, hideous creature pretending to be human. Something within me broke, and demonic energy surged forth, filling every inch of my body with rage and energy. Damn, you! I roared, summoning Ebony, and pointed it at Charles's head. It wasn't the threat of freaking dissection that ticked me off, no. It was the other thing. He was a freaking dead man, no two ways about it. I willed energy into the chamber of the gun, and it obeyed. The barrel gained a golden crimson light that slowly started to glow brighter. Charles panicked and stopped messing about, pitting the full force of his mind against mine. But I roared in defiance, shoving him back. To hell with the consequences. Jean was not on my side, and I'd cut through all of the X-Men if I had to. I knew he was talking out of his arse, but he'd gotten under my skin nonetheless. It didn't help that Jean's betrayal was still so fresh. In the end, I was left alone to take care of business. Again, with gritted teeth, I slowly got up to my feet, burning even more demonic energy. Temperatures peak in the office, setting loose paper on fire and scorching the ground below me as I took step after hellish step toward Charles. I wasn't going to damn miss. I saw the genuine look of fear in Charles's eyes when he recognized that I was beyond him for that brief moment. Of course, he was going to win out eventually, but it wouldn't be before I shot him dead. I squeezed the trigger, but before my gun went off, a force jerked my hand. Aya! Everything below Charles's left elbow disappeared, along with a chunk of his wheelchair, and just like that, the pain was gone. Congratulations. You've unlocked a new demonic technique. Focus shot. 25 DE. In the place of the overwhelming pain, I felt a presence that dwarfed Xavier's. I knew it was Jean, and frankly, I didn't care. I used my new skills again. Energy started to gather in the barrel of my gun. I pointed it at a bleeding, mewling Xavier, ready to put the son of a bitch to bed. Don't, Jean commanded. Please. Why not? I growled. He freaking deserves it. You saw what he did, what he said. I was right. He was controlling you and probably every mutant here. Killing him was never part of the plan, Jean said. What part of the plan was leaving me to get multiple damn aneurysms? I yelled. You were supposed to step in the very moment shit started to go sideways. What happened, Jean? I froze, she said, choking back tears. I didn't want to believe he was capable of that. She froze. What sort of bullshit excuse was that? I wanted to yell at her, but then a question appeared. What did you expect was going to happen? She'd known him since she was a child, and now she was finding out that he was some twisted monster who got kicks out of manipulating people. Yelling at her would only make matters worse. Still, it didn't soften the blow of her betrayal. I know you weren't ready, Jean, I said slowly, but I stuck my neck out for you. Your inaction almost got me killed. The professor's blood pooled beneath my feet. He was starting to bleed a little too much. He was going to die before I had the benefit of killing him. I'm sorry, she sobbed. It was easy to forget that Jean was still a kid. I sighed, releasing the energy buildup alongside my coat. The demonic aura stealing nearly half of my demonic energy. 250/400 plus 3 demonic energy. At least something good came out of this. It was a shame that was not enough to awaken my devil trigger. I vanished my gun without ever looking back at Jean. Save him, I said, and she immediately rushed over to his side, ripping a piece of her shirt to start an emergency triage. Jean, save your strength, she cut him off. I turned away from the pair and began to walk towards the window. Dipping my hand into my pocket, I hit the stop button on the tape recorder. Dante, Jean called out, but I didn't look in her direction. She hated Xavier, obviously, but he was still family. I didn't want to do something as drastic as cutting Jean off. I needed her, but the entire episode showed me that I was not nearly as good at manipulating people as I thought I was. I may need to take a class on manipulation or go slower next time. I promised I wouldn't abandon you, and I won't. I said, I'm coming to get you as soon as I get the sorceress on our side. I can't afford to stay mad at you, Jean. Not with everything at stake. As for you, Charles, I raised my recording device. Our entire conversation was recorded. You will negotiate that meeting as promised, or this will get leaked online. Every mutant, everywhere, will know exactly how you treat your new wards. Dante, you didn't. I heard a slight panic and surprise creep into her voice. My academy, the X-Men. He wheezed. We do so much good here. You'll lose it all, Charles, I warned. If you so much as look at me funny, everything you've worked for 20 years will come crashing down. You messed with the wrong guy. You're my bitch now. I gave Jean a final look. Tell everyone or don't tell them. I don't really care. Just be ready when I come for you. I leaped out of the window just as Storm, Wolverine, and a handful of students rushed into the professor's office. Shouts echoed behind me, but I was gone the second I hit the ground. Liberal use of Angel Evade and Burst turned me into a blur. I took the goodies Jean bought for me and suited up in an all-black X-Men suit I nabbed from Cyclops' wardrobe when I stole the tape recorder. I ripped off the X-Men logo, partially because I couldn't stand the sight of Charles and mainly because I wanted all of the glory for what was about to happen for myself. Thinking about the entire episode with Jean and Charles still burned me. It was so tempting to give the bald git what was coming to him. But I needed to think long-term if I was going to survive in this universe. I could fillet the bastard after I got my Phoenix Flame. Until then, I settled for taking out my rage on the criminals of Hell's Kitchen. As you can tell, the timeline has been a bit screwy. Jean Grey being a teenager when Storm is fully grown, Kitty Pryde only being 2 years younger. We weren't in the 616 universe or the 199999 universe either. That became crystal clear to me when I turned on the news the other day and saw a bald man with an egg-shaped head and a waistline the size of a great oak giving a speech about restoring the glory of Hell's Kitchen through innovations and revitalization. I nearly did a spit take, but it did help me put together why the crime rate in that part of the city has been insane recently. An arms race between the Russians and the Albanians started a few days ago. Luckily, neither side has lost too many people, but the violence has driven most folk with common sense out of the neighborhood, giving Fisk exactly what he wanted. I couldn't prove he was supplying both sides, and I wasn't eager to in the first place. All I cared about was pilfering his weapons for myself and bagging the heads of both sides. They would make a compelling offer to shield and prove I had what it took to work with them. At the very least, it would buy me some goodwill with Fury, which was all I needed really to win him over to my side. Some things remain true regardless of what universe you were in. My journey to Hell's Kitchen went by faster than I anticipated. Liberal use of Ophiant's grappling hook and Angel Lift's swinging function had me zipping from building to building like Spider-Man. It helped that I could move much faster than the average man. I had 40 agility, giving me 4 times the speed of a high-level athlete, and with my endurance, I could keep on going for hours. I landed on the rooftops near a popular Russian bar and used Ophiant to yank up a guy doing his business behind a dumpster with Ophiant's demon pull. The transition had been so sudden that he hadn't even gotten the chance to scream before he was on the roof. I brought an Orochi kunai to his eye before he could make a pip. The Russian had about $1,000, a big knife, and a brand new Beretta with the serial number filed off. Scream, and you die before you even blink, I said. Resist me and you die. Remember, you're not irreplaceable. There's an entire bar of Russians down below us, and I don't mind cutting through all of them to get the answers I want, I said, inching my blade closer to the white of his eye. He tried his best not to blink. Despite the cold, he was sweating. Where's your armory? There was a stretch of silence as the man contemplated his options. I saw his muscles tense before he even moved. My hand lashed out, slashing the Russian man's forearm before the haymaker came remotely close. He bit down a startled yelp of pain and tried to swat me back with the other hand, but I casually caught it and twisted his forearm, forcing him to his knees. My dagger lashed out twice more, scoring hollow cuts on his forearm and shoulder. I dismissed the Orochi kunai and clamped down on his mouth before he alerted the entire street. The Russian looked up at me with newfound fear. Slowly, the hopelessness of the situation was starting to sink in. That was the beauty of the Orochi kunais. They were designed to torture, not kill. Does your insides feel like they're on fire? I hissed. This is only the beginning. Every cut will bring you close to death's door. How many more do you think your mind and body can take? 5 more, 6? Who is supplying you with the guns? I asked again. The Russian tried to scream the second I let go of his mouth, but I jabbed his throat, leaving him a gasping, crumpling mess. The ease at which I dismantled him was a bit eerie. An insane reaction time was another benefit of moving 4 times faster than a peak athlete. He was gasping before a single sound came out. 3 more cuts tore up his chest, and his eyes rolled to the back of his head as he tried and failed to yell for help through his bruised windpipe. Last chance. W, our house 13. Teach, Ebe docs. He spoke in desperate gasps. Y-O-U-R-E. Making. Huge. Mistake. Sure I was. I patted him on the back. Congratulations, you don't die today, but you're not walking away either. I knocked him out with a swift punch to the back of the head and used some of the rope that Jean had bought me to tie his hands and legs into an impossible knot. I would have killed him if he'd seen my face. Lucky for both of us, I wore a ski mask. Another piece of rope also went around his mouth to ensure he didn't call any unwanted attention. I dropped down to the street level and swaggered into the bar. My mask was still on, and all eyes swiveled in my direction. Good. I hoped they wouldn't make this too easy for me. But before I could say something clever and probably culturally offensive, a man sitting at the back of the room yelled something in Russian, and everybody got to their feet in alarm, pulling AKs, pistols, and knives. My eyes went a bit wide. That was a lot of firepower, but I had Angel Dash, Demon Burst, Evade, Focus Shot, and was nearly a master in a dozen martial arts. I wasn't that worried. Still, the casualness with which they pulled their weapons alarmed me a bit. When the first man dashed toward me, I tensed up, a bit confused. He had his gun in his hand, but closed the distance between us. Either he was an absolute fool or I was not his target in the first place. "Move," he commanded, and I stepped to the side, allowing him and 20 other Russians to take to the streets and hop into their cars. The boss was the last to leave. He was an older, gentle man with a lean build and a walking stick with a silver handle. He had 2 men in clean-cut suits standing beside him. He stopped just as he passed me and spoke in a thick Russian accent. "You're lucky. You would have left here eating out of a straw any other night. This is your only warning." He made to leave, but I stopped him. "Wait, what's going on?" His 2 guards looked like they were about to throttle me, but I just raised a brow. "You have balls," he laughed. "Are you sure you're not Russian under that mask? Leave Hell's Kitchen tonight if you want to live." I don't make a habit of running from fights. I run towards them. The boss laughed. "Is that why you came here? To fight my men? To offer my services?" I responded enigmatically. "They call me Arsenal. I'm a mercenary by trade." The older man measured me as his bodyguard's arms inched toward the pistols in their jacket pockets. "Come to fatten yourself on our misfortune," he laughed. "I would have done the same when I was your age." "Very well, follow. Prove yourself in the fight to come, and you'll be handsomely rewarded. Cross us, and Peter here will feed you your guts." "Fair enough," I nodded, passing a look at the mountain of the man called Peter. He stood to the right of the Russian boss, and was the larger of the pair. His face was covered in scars marks, and I was tempted to use the devil's eye on him. But I didn't want them to suspect me until it was too late. I joined the old man in his car. It turned out his name was Henri, and the Russians were finally taking the fight with the Albanian because some no-name goon decided to help themselves to the daughter of the Albanian gang head. He was put down immediately, but the damage had already been done. The girl's father was livid, and he demanded blood. "That'll do it," I said. Henri shook his head. "In my day, we knew better than to leave witnesses alive." I thought he felt for the girl for a moment, but he was the head of a criminal organization. I didn't know what I was expecting. "Don't stop until you run out of blood relatives, I always say," I chuckled, and Henri gave an approving look. It's rare to find somebody so young who is not completely clueless about how the world works. "I was forced to learn fairly early on," I said. "Then you understand the need for this preemptive attack," Henri said. "It will put this matter to bed once and for all. Her father, Gregory, will be the first to go, then the rest of the family. After my experience this afternoon, I couldn't say I wasn't a fan of a good old-fashioned preemptive strike, but wiping out an entire bloodline seemed excessive. It would be the equivalent of killing Xavier's mutants, because I didn't want them returning for revenge. With Xavier's hold on his school so potent, I couldn't say for sure that I would not be forced into that position. I could think of a few hot-headed students who'd readily come after me for revenge if they were not chasing me down already. Peter did not take his eyes off me the entire time we spoke. Eventually, I heard the sound of gunfire. The fight had started ahead of us, and we were one of the last cars to arrive. Trevor, the second bodyguard, pulled up a few blocks from the fight, and we climbed down from the vehicle. The tailgate popped open to reveal a veritable arsenal. It contained a sniper rifle, a shotgun, pistols, and a submachine gun. I whistled. Henri smirked. "The fight is so fierce that Gregory will never see us coming. I've been waiting for this for a long time." "I bet you have," I said casually, summoning the fingers of Orochi. Peter reacted, covering his boss before the daggers fanned out. "Huh, impressive. Considering how fast I was now, it was quite a feat." Trevor went down immediately, writhing, and Peter dropped to his knee, shaking and growling as 2 daggers stuck out of his back. He looked back at me with a ferocious glare before he started frothing from the mouth and promptly passed out. I summoned Ebony and fired at Henry's hand, removing the handgun he'd been trying to sneak when his bodyguard was incapacitated. You cannot unring this bell, boy. Henri threatened as I swaggered close. Are you going to comply, or am I going to have to be an asshole? I asked in a bored voice. Henri set his jaw, glaring up at me, but did not put up a fight. I pulled out my rope and got to work, hog-tying the man. Before I gagged him, I asked, "Where's the Albanian gang leader holed up?" Henri laughed. "Whoever hired you cannot protect you. Stop this at once, and I'll consider it a misstep. You don't want to make enemies of two of the biggest East European gangs in the world." I summoned another finger of Orochi and stabbed it into his knee. Henri bit back a surprised scream. "I have bigger fish to worry about than some street-level thugs. Tell me what I need to know, or I start peeling," and I was only half joking. Henri looked at me with a steely gaze. "Men 10 times better than you have tried to break me. I've seen the horrors of the world, boy. You don't scare me." My eyes flashed red as I coaxed some of my demonic energy, letting it leak out of me in waves. It formed a screeching, flaming echo that seemed to paralyze Henri. "Congratulations. You've unlocked the demonic technique, Aura. Unshackle your demonic side, inflicting fear on the weak-minded." "Maybe I should," I growled. "Don't make me ask you a third time, Henri. What are you?" Henri shivered. The once mighty gang boss now reduced to a blubbering mess. "Haven't you ever picked up a Bible?" I chuckled. "Demon, answer the damn question," I roared, punching the ground beside Henry's head. It cracked. "He's 2 bars down," he said, his face slick with sweat. "The place is heavily fortified. No one can get in. That's why I brought the sniper rifle. Why don't you let me worry about that?" I smiled. "Don't worry your pretty little head." Gregory was holed up 2 buildings down from the firefight. 10 minutes into the struggle, police crowded the area while I climbed the roof of the building opposite Gregory's. After retrieving all of my knives, I left Henry's incapacitated men to their fates while I kidnapped the Russian boss and parked him and the car far away from the fight in an abandoned alley. I found my point of entry into Gregory's fortress on the back of an unknowing schmuck, leaning into the far wall across from a window on the 3rd floor of the building. I summoned Ophion, and Angel pulled to him. Glass shattered, and he was jerked forward suddenly, but the goon's body held until Ophion carried me into the building, me first. I kneed the Albanian into the wall, knocking the air out of him. A punch to the jaw ensured he wouldn't get up for a while. Gun mastery took over as I picked up his gun, checked the magazine, and vanished it into devil arm. The first man that came around the corner got a kunai to the shoulder and a palm strike to the jaw, lifting him straight into the ceiling before he unceremoniously crashed down, unconscious. I summoned a bat as I retrieved my knife and moved on. I knew I was leaving red orbs on the table, but that was not the point of the night. I needed to show S.H.I.E.L.D. I could be tactical and effective without killing. Around the bend, I counted 4 men yelling something at each other in Albanian as they inched closer to where the noise had come from. There were probably a few other men hurrying up the stairwell as well. I grabbed one of the 2 flashbangs I stole from Toad's men and chucked it into their midst. Somebody yelled as the flash went off. An angel evaded into their midst for the silent approach. I spread my palms and reduced my strength by half as I waded into the conflict. Devil, I kept their information above their heads, allowing me to easily track them through the smoke. 2 strikes folded the first man, flipping him over. I blocked a knife strike to my left, wrapping up the arm under my elbow and spraining it. He screamed. A strike to the face knocked the second man out. The third stupidly let a bullet fly, and I had to angel evade in front of the 4th guy with rebellion raised to save him. I put the surprised man down with an elbow strike to the midsection and slap to the jaw, leaving me with the last asshole. His gun went off again, but I was behind him when it did. A firm chop to the temple rendered him unconscious. Behind me, I heard dozens of footsteps thundering up the staircase to the floor I was currently on. I cracked a smile and got to work. There was an explosion of movement, punches, kicks, gunshots, tumbles, and kicks. More than once, I had to draw deeper into my strength pool to make sure I was not overwhelmed. But by the end of it, I came out victorious, and no one ended up dead. My time on the 4th floor, however, was considerably more difficult. They shred through the doors the second they heard my legs hit the top of the staircase, and I had to angel shift immediately to avoid most of the bullets, though a few punched through my chest and gut. Angel regeneration healed me enough to clot the wounds, and I pulled ebony and fired into the door hinges and locks, bringing it down and allowing me a clear entrance into the room. Angel Evade carried me into the room in a streak of blue light, and I maneuvered behind the guy with the largest assault rifle and clocked him in the head. I threw him to the left while diving to the right as the two other gunmen fired. Another Angel Evade brought me close enough to the second gunman to shove the barrel of his gun up and punch him in the throat. He crumpled, and before the third guy could fire, I was already by his side, slamming him into the wall. He tried to get up, but a swift kick to the face rendered him unconscious. That gets easier every time. Angel Evade was frankly broken, or at least the way I used it was. I went around the room confiscating every second gun, pistol, and grenade. Believe it or not, those assholes had grenades, but they'd been far too scared to use them. My stash grew to 14 assault rifles, 1 large case of ammunition, 10 pistols, and 1 flashbang. I was about to kick open the final door into the room where Gregory was holed up when I considered what I'd do in his situation. He was probably armed with something that could do a shit ton of damage, and as durable as I was, I didn't want to test if I could bounce back from taking an RPG to the face. So, I approached the situation from an angle he'd never suspect. I came crashing into Gregory's window with Ophion, and a gun went off. As I'd predicted, Gregory had been packing, and it was an automatic shotgun. A finger of Orochi stabbed into his trigger arm when he swiveled to point the gun at me. And with a burst, I closed the distance between us, disappeared his gun, and slammed Gregory into the ground. He passed out without ever getting a word out. The Albanian portion of the shipment was in Gregory's office, waiting for me. No trip necessary. I plucked the entire arsenal with a smirk on my face. There was a crap ton of grenades, launchers, and enough ammunition to take over a small fortress. But this was only half my take for the night. The other half was waiting for me in a warehouse across town. I tied up Gregory and leaped out of the shattered window. I saw police cars parked below as I moved through the air. I gave myself a second boost to get me over the ledge of the building I'd just come from and landed with a stumble. It was a small miracle that Gregory didn't fall from my shoulder. Quite the jump, I hear somebody say behind me. With a confused frown, I turned and came eye to eye with Natasha Romanoff. She looked nothing like her MCU counterpart, but her striking red hair, killer beauty, and hand-mounted stingers were a dead giveaway. They were both pointed at me. "I'm afraid I'm not quite ready for our face-to-face yet, Agent," I said. "Drop the body." "I'd rather not do that," I said. "Besides, Gregory doesn't look like he'll like it much. He's already sore and unconscious from the jump." "I'm taking you in, Dante Sparda," she said. "The director would like a word." "I'm sure Fury would," I said, earning a surprised look from Romanoff. "How do you know the director's name?" Natasha warmed up her stingers. I smirked. "That wasn't in my file, was it?" "I said drop it before I drop you," she repeated. "You're not getting a third warning." I raised a brow, scanning the building around me. In the distance, I noticed somebody with a bow and arrow on a high perch staring at me. I activated Devil's Eye and immediately identified him. Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye Clint Barton, is an expert bowman, combatant, and one of the deadliest agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. With a smile, I lowered Gregor's body, holding it directly in the line of Barton's shot. "I'd think you'd prefer a sniper, but a bowman also works." Natasha froze for a moment before she spoke. "I don't need backup to bring you to your knees, Mr. Sparda. If you've heard about me, you certainly know the stories." Natasha Romanoff was infamous in the spy scene in this world. She carried out thousands of assassinations as a brainwashed drone before being rescued, and then going straight and narrow. She, of all people, should be the most sympathetic to my cause if she dared to go against Fury. "I've heard bits and pieces, Romanoff," I said, "and you don't scare me. Tell your director I look forward to seeing him." "Don't dash," Natasha started, but I was already moving. I chucked Gregory's unconscious body over the edge, startling her, and chased after him using Angel Evade. "Don't dash," Natasha started, but I was already moving. I chucked Gregory's unconscious body over the edge, startling her, and dashed after her using Angel Evade. I landed just in time to catch him and burst to the side to avoid Clint's arrow. It let out a sonic burst that ruptured one of my eardrums, preventing me from Angel Evading again. I still kept pace despite being loopy and disoriented. I threw Gregory on my back while I spiked Angel Regeneration. My ear popped, and my hearing returned. Clint hadn't fired another arrow. Gregory's body had given me cover as I hurried toward my car. Natasha popped out behind a bend just before I got to the car, and I ducked in time to avoid a 720 kick. It was no easy feat, with the extra weight dragging me down, but I made it work. When Natasha started sprinting toward me, I forced myself to stay absolutely still. I held my ground when the blow came and weaved back just enough. Her fist nearly grazed my jaw as I spiked Demon Evade, filling my body with violent crimson energy that I immediately put to use by grabbing Natasha by the arm. She tried blocking me, but I just yanked her to the side, destabilizing her, and tossed her into the air. Considering she was under 120 pounds, and I momentarily had the strength of 7 elite men, she went pretty far up. "See you around, Black Widow," I quipped as I continued my trip. No arrow came from Clint again. He was probably too busy trying to save Natasha. I kept my head on a swivel as I made it to my car and shoved Gregory in. I took the scenic route to the warehouse, which had enough guns and ammunition to outfit a small army. There was even an RPG and a flamethrower in there. I took the best goodies. It made me wonder what madness they had planned. Whatever the case was, the new heroes of New York would probably handle it. In the meantime, I made my escape, walking past 2 unconscious men I disabled with my daggers. 8 hours, 22 minutes the drive back to Xavier's place was tense. Gregory and Henri had come to a while back and were bucking like wild animals at the rear of the SUV I was driving. But it was smooth sailing for me. I half expected to run into some ambush by a vengeful Natasha or furious Clint. It was no surprise when S.H.I.E.L.D. showed up, yet I was powerless to stop it. An arrow speared through the hood of my SUV, killing the engine immediately. Cars rolled out of the forest around the wooded path up to Xavier's, and 2 heavy-duty transport cars blocked my front and rear exits. Lights focused on me and a black man who looked suspiciously like Samuel L. Jackson, but more muscular and taller. "You said you wanted to talk. Let's talk." My devil's eye flashed, and I scanned the forest and the surrounding area. Nick had nearly 50 heavily armed S.H.I.E.L.D. agents scattered in the forest around me. Some looked down the scope of snipers, others carried assault rifles, and a few carried specialty rounds, net guns, and all manner of S.H.I.E.L.D. tech. Fury must have had them designed to restrain powered individuals. "Talk, huh?" I said as I slowly climbed out of my car and removed my mask. There was no need for that anyway. "You're armed with enough firepower to level a small compound. Charles brought me up to speed on your latest development," he said, "and I've adjusted as necessary. I've known Charles longer than you've been alive, and it takes somebody truly dangerous to rattle him, much less cripple him. If you know what I know, you wouldn't stop at his arm," I said. Damn Charles. Of course, he tried to double-cross me despite my threats. While it was true that he couldn't control me, there was no rule against puppeting everybody else. A small part of me feared that Fury was compromised, but then again, he was the Batman of the Marvel Universe. Something told me that Fury had countermeasures for mental intrusions like that. "Charles also told me about your other abilities," Fury said, "and my agents confirmed as much after you hooped their asses. You know things you're not supposed to." My eyes turned red as I activated Devil's Eye, giving off the impression that I was staring into the soul of the one-eyed director. I heard a series of clicks as agents switched off the safety of their weapons. I mentally chuckled. Nick Fury, he is an experienced fighter and strategist enhanced by the Infinity Serum to extend his lifespan considerably. "You look rather spry for a man your age," I said, tilting my head to the side. I rather enjoyed playing the enigmatic devil guy. "That's a neat little trick," he said. "Add that to the fact that Xavier can't see in your head, and I can see why he thinks you're the devil himself. But I don't need to see inside your head to know a pretender when I hear one," Fury said, stepping forward. "He told me you want to negotiate the terms of your service with S.H.I.E.L.D. Taking down a gang outpost and kidnapping the heads of 2 of the biggest gangs in New York is a hell of a way to start. Do you know how many people died? How much money you're costing the taxpayers? Probably a lot less than it's costing them to mount this ambush. No one died in my little crusade, even if they freaking deserved it," I said. "And I know you know that. I attacked the Albanians and the Russians to prove a point. I'm damn good, and I'm not some out-of-control killer. Everybody I've dropped until now was either in self-defense or because it had to be done. And what about that S.H.I.E.L.D. agent?" Fury demanded. "Victor had a great family, kids, and a bright future ahead of him. Did he deserve to die?" I could tell by his tone that Fury was done playing. I was one lousy answer away from the hardest fight of my life. "It was self-defense," I said. "He came at me, and I defended myself, and the autopsy should back me up. It doesn't, Fury said. And all your little display in Hell's Kitchen did was complicate our strained relationship with local law enforcement. They had agents in the organization in place to bring down the heads of both gangs when the time was right. The news was like a punch to the gut. All of that work, planning, plotting. How could I not have seen it? They were after Fisk, weren't they? Fury looked impressed. You're not completely clueless then. Still, I wonder how you're getting your intel. Charles already told you, I said, flaring my eyes again. The tone of his voice told me that he would try to capture me if it came down to it. Fury was up and up in most universes. But Charles' telepathy was ridiculously powerful. You never know. Still, I preferred putting some cards on the table before the situation devolved further. I know there are exactly 50 other agents here tonight. I know Natasha and Clint are on top of the transport truck behind me. And I know how you really lost that eye. Does the name Goose ring a bell? Fury's single eye grew wide as a saucer. Bastard. That information is classified. How did you? You know how, I said, taking a bold step closer to Fury. Several soldiers twitched in the background, and Fury raised a hand to stop them. I have seen many things, Director Fury. An old enemy is returning. You and the Earth are in more danger than you realize. Let me guess, demons? Fury scoffed, and I grinned. Something like that. Everybody clear out, Fury ordered. Give Dante and me some space. We need to talk. Despite what Fury said, I still saw that most of his men hung back with the use of my devil's eye. It was shocking that I could see this far without a perception stat, but I guessed that every part of me was enhanced between all of my physical stats. You said the Earth was in danger, Fury began. Tell me more about this enemy. Are they demons like you? I'm not a demon. Xavier sure as hell thinks so. Charles Xavier is a groomer masquerading as an activist, and he's far more dangerous than you think. Any man who commands the respect of the president and most world leaders has to be, Fury said. And despite what you might think of him, he doesn't lie. That got a good chuckle out of me. That might be true most of the time, I said. But even the professor has secrets he doesn't want seeing the light of day. I take it you saw one of those secrets? Oh, I did more than that, I smiled. I lived it, and he's pitting you against me to keep my mouth shut. If he sold you out, why keep his secret? I could do something about it if I knew the specifics of what you claim he's done. No, thank you. I'll hang on to my blackmail, I said. It will come out eventually, but only when the time is right. Back to the end of the world. What can you tell me about this threat? Fury asked. For a moment, I considered how to approach the conversation before I spoke. Our universe is far more complicated than you understand or realize, Director Fury. There's life beyond Earth, and a great deal of the civilizations out there want what we have and have the army to take it. You've seen it once in the 80s with the Kree. You met Carol Danvers and the Flurkin. And you probably know that the cube you've had in your vault since the 70s is alien tech. The comment about Carol Danvers and the Flurkin was a gamble. But given how he'd reacted when I hinted at it initially, I had a feeling I was right on the money. Fury's face didn't give away much, but I could tell he was surprised. The cube is the key to Earth's salvation, but it will also destroy us if you let it, I warned in a calm voice. But that problem is years away. The biggest threat to the survival of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the world you're so desperate to protect is Quellatrax. Finally, Fury reacted. You had me up until the cube. What the hell is a Quellatrax? If my devil's eye is to be believed, he's a being that's come from somewhere out of our universe. And he wants to consume the Earth, I said. He'll be here in 8 hours, give or take. Fury blinked. You can't be serious. I'm afraid I am. Deathly so. We need to get to an isolated area. The last time it was here, I was able to stop it, so it perceived me as a threat to its safety. Once it takes me out, it believes it will have an easier time consuming this planet. There's never been a successful invasion of Earth ever, Fury started, and our satellites haven't spotted any approaching spacecraft. I can't help but think you're full of shit, Dante. Who said anything about a spaceship? I laughed. He came by portal the last time. Portal? Fury scoffed. I know how crazy it sounds, but you'll have your answer in 8 hours. Then, you can rule me off as a false clairvoyant. But what if I am right? Your ass is mine if this is a waste of my time. Fury jabbed his finger at me, then sighed, bringing his hand up to his earpiece and activating it. Hawkeye Widow, I need you to lead an operation with our friends here. According to him, New York is about to be attacked. Initiate the Defender Protocol and get Coulson on standby to make the calls. What's the Defender's protocol? I asked, genuinely surprised. I didn't think S.H.I.E.L.D. had such a comprehensive response strategy to extraterrestrial life this early. It made me wonder what other secret protocols they had. Our damn you've option for times like these, Fury said. If we're lucky, we won't have to use it, but if you're right. I am, I said. And when the Quellatrax fragment is dead, you and I need to have a more serious conversation. There's something you'll have to hear, and it takes higher priority than the alien invasion. Fury shook his head. I can see why Charles didn't like you very much. We just met, and you're already a huge pain in my ass. Scott, are you kidding me? I threw my hands up. What do you mean we can't go after him? He's in a meeting with the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., one of the most powerful secret organizations in the world, Beast explained. By the end of their talks, he'll either have a badge that supersedes almost any authority on the planet, or he'll be locked away for life. Here's to hoping it turns out to be the latter, I huffed, pacing. Logan and Aurora stood silently in contemplation. Jean was not even in the room. I wanted her to be here for this conversation. She was an X-Men. She'd seen everything that had happened. She knew how dangerous Dante was. Instead, she glued herself to the professor's bedside, not that I could fault her for it. He needed the attention after everything he's endured. Still, I couldn't help but fear that Dante was forcing her silence somehow. I balled my fist. I could never forgive myself if that asshole hurt her in any way. He should have never been in the X-Mansion to begin with, I said. We should have just turned him over to the police when we had the chance. The police couldn't hold him, Logan grunted. He'd have ended up on the cutting table being poked and played with. At least he'll be out of our lives, and Jean and the professor would be safe. Scott, Aurora snapped. You are still a child, so you don't quite understand what you're saying. Being experimented on is one of the greatest injustices our kind have ever faced. To wish it on somebody, even if they're our enemy, is unfeeling. I was used to Aurora yelling at me, but this was beyond that. She was genuinely upset, and I was unsure if I could fix it or if I wanted to. He just makes me so angry, I growled. Thankfully, Beast came to my rescue. You should go and see her, he offered. Jean and the professor will need you when they wake up. Dr. Hank, that boy, Storm began, looking at Scott's retreating form. He means well, but his anger blinds him. I fear he's far too rigid to lead the X-Men. The kid just needs time, Logan grunted. The prof babies em, but eventually, they'll have to see the ugly side of the fight. Dante's their first real look. I looked down at my tablet and up at the room, my night vision chasing away the darkness of the night. I frowned. Still, Dante went too far, Logan said. I wonder what set him off. Last I knew, he and the prof were getting along just fine. The professor didn't call for him exactly, Storm said. He followed Jean up. Maybe the professor said something, or he learned about the plot to keep him here? Hardly reason to blow off somebody's arm, Logan argued. Despite what Scott might think and tell people, the kid has been pretty reasonable. For weeks and no complaints of violence or misbehavior. I think I might know what set him off, Beast slowly said. The professor struck first, I said, pointing to the splotch of blood in front of the professor's table. Notice Xavier's blood is fresher. Jean hadn't even finished the tourniquet when we rushed in. Why would he attack him? Storm questioned. Maybe the kid pulled his sword? Logan hazarded, but I doubted it. I'd watched Dante train for weeks. I knew how fast he could move toward the end. 83 miles per hour faster than the human I could track. Good thing I wasn't entirely human, and neither was Charles. But he was perfectly ordinary everywhere except his mind. I was rapidly arriving at the undesirable conclusion that Charles had struck first, unprovoked. Logan likely suspected as much as he sniffed the air and stared at the blood spatter. But I elected to delay the conversation until I spoke to Xavier himself. Only Jean and the professor know what happened for sure, I said. We will ask them when they're ready. Logan, however, seemed to have missed my hint and continued talking. The prof is no slouch, but there's no way I see him wounding the kid unless... You're not thinking the professor attacked his mind? Storm suggested. It would explain the blood, I muttered, thinking out loud. All of the blood vessels in his head must have ruptured dozens of times. I've never seen the old man take down somebody that hard, Logan said. Not even Magneto got this sort of treatment. He must have been really pissed off, or he was that afraid. Dante has mental resistance, Storm said. When you consider his healing factor, the professor might have had to push that hard to stop him. But it didn't keep him down for long. I pointed at the scorched wooden floor and the finger-sized hole in the wall behind Xavier's chair. If even Xavier cannot stop him, Dante is more powerful than any of us realized, I said. We need to prepare for that during our next meeting. Logan grunted in agreement but squinted. Still, something doesn't feel right. Logan had no idea. I suppose we'll find out soon enough, Storm concluded, then turned to me when she noticed my turmoil. Are you okay, Professor? I'm not sure, I said truthfully. I need some time to think. I stood far away from Clint and Natasha in what they called Defender gear. Next-generation body armor used a proprietary blend of metal, Kevlar, carbon fiber, and reactive materials that instantly went stiff when impacted by blunt force trauma. I was dressed in a unibody suit, with tanks wielding sonic cannons behind me and dozens of soldiers carrying rifles that were at least 10 years ahead of anything on the market. Per my instructions, we've kept the initial response lean, comprising just 10 heavily armed men, while the other 50 soldiers hung back with their rifles and tanks. I'd told Fury about Quellatrax's obsession with consumption. I hated to see what the creep could manage with human biomass. I was making them fight my battle for me. The least I could do was be honest with them. To an extent. The boss man wouldn't mind if I kept this after the fight. Would he? I asked Clint, who kept his head on a swivel, surveying the valley we had set up at. Each suit of armor cost taxpayers over $2 million, Clint yelled back. So that's a yes. Don't let the director catch you making plans for his property, Natasha said. He's likely to trust you less than he already does. I looked at Natasha and made my eyes turn red. This is coming from the ex-Russian spy. Natasha didn't react. That doesn't get any less creepy, Clint commented, and I heard Fury's voice buzzing in my ears. If you're done with your parlor tricks, tell me how long we have till they show up. 10 minutes and 45 seconds. I heard Fury's voice boom over a speaker in the background. Set your watches, gentlemen. We're 10 minutes out. The following 10 minutes were the longest of my life. The outcome of this mission would determine the course of my life moving forward. I'd either spend it as an asset of S.H.I.E.L.D. or a murder-robo fugitive dropping bodies left and right. On the bright side, I had enough ammunition in my weapon vault to level a small town and would come out of this deal with multiple new weapons. S.H.I.E.L.D. will not be detaining me today, even if that means killing Fury and every soldier here. I hefted the grenade launcher S.H.I.E.L.D. had given men and double-checked it, waiting patiently for the timer to hit 0. The second it did, a dot appeared in reality, and slowly, it grew like an ink splotch of pure darkness. A wave of nervousness swept the rank. Most soldiers were understandably freaked out, but they hid it better than I'd expected. Even Clint and Natasha, expert spies, looked out of their depths. When the dot grew to the size of a window, Fury roared, "Fire!" I was already launching a grenade at it from a distance. For smoking pellets dropped on the dark spot, exploding as dozens of rifle fire and explosions ripped into the darkness and the landscape around it. It continued to grow regardless, and finally slowed down when it reached the size of a door. A laugh carrying 1,000 voices echoed from the abyss. Its voice was like nails on chalk and caused our communications to wig out momentarily. Amusing, it croaked. You cannot stop what is to come. I will savor the taste of your souls. An unnatural chill swept the morning air, even though it was noon. And I could tell some agents were shitting themselves. Clint and Natasha were terrified, but you wouldn't know it with their poker faces. Dozens of tentacles rushed out of the rift, reaching for me and the row of agents closest to it. Son of an expedient demonic burst carried me far back enough to grab Clint and Natasha and toss them back. They were the only 2 that escaped out of 10, and the transformation occurred immediately. The tentacles bore into their orifices, filling them with darkness until their eyes turned black. Thankfully, the surviving S.H.I.E.L.D. agents didn't just wait until the body snatcher finished. Natasha was the first to fire her rifle, drilling a hole in an ex-agent's head. An arrow from Clint followed after, and that opened the floodgates. Fury gave the order, and everybody fired, shredding the agents from afar. Their body suits held on longer than I expected before exploding from the pressure. Entire limbs disappeared, and brain matter was spilled. I contributed to the chaos with 2 shots of my grenade launcher, thoroughly scattering what remained of the agents, and I got a notification. Without even reading it, I instantly knew something was wrong. "Don't let your guard down," I yelled. "There's not all dead. Congratulations." You've defeated a lesser Eldritch propagator. You've earned 30 red orbs. This breed of Eldritch monsters differed from the brutes and spawn I faced. Quell was beefing up his army. I activated Devil Eye, peering through the smoke, and spotted 5 propagators darting into the forest behind us, their speeds almost twice as fast as ordinary men. The remaining 2 did something I did not quite expect. Black tentacles oozed out of their barely put-together bodies, and they began to merge, pulling in the dirt, discarded weapons, and spare body parts. Jesus Christ, I muttered as I aimed my grenade launcher. Fire where I fire. There's something in the smoke. We're in trouble if we don't put it down before it completes its transformation. I did not hold back. I kept shooting until I was out of ammunition. And when that was done, I summoned an AK and continued ripping into it. Our attack sent it stumbling and spinning, but it did considerably less damage than our initial volley. It had stripped all of the reactive armor, gathered it around its chest to tank the attack, and wrapped its main body in black tentacles. When the creature finally returned fire, I was the only one fast enough to react. 6 rifles cocked themselves and started firing. It cut through the first line like grass while I frantically used burst. Natasha and Clint ducked low and navigated their way behind a truck, and I was behind another with a sniper rifle mounted on my shoulder. I looked down the scope and saw that most of our first line was dead. The dust had settled, and the monster standing before me was 2-headed with 6 arms and 4 twisted legs that ferried it around the battlefield like a twisted crustacean. I took the sniper shot at the same time as Clint and 2 other snipers, taking off both of the beast's heads and 2 arms. Shockingly, the body parts held on with thick cords of black sludge, yanking them back into position and sealing the wounds. More black tentacles burst out of the monster's wound, stabbing other dead soldiers and pulling their bodies in. That's concerning, Clint said. Unit 2, 4, and 6 watch our flanks. I don't know where his friends disappeared to, but I bet they'll be swinging back around, Fury ordered. Donald, rip that thing apart with the sonic cannons. Everybody tapped the side of their earpieces as the sonic weapons powered up. The world went quiet, and the landscape before us quaked as trees shook and split, and the monster shrieked and waffled. The sight was humbling. Tentacles turned to sludge and leaked out of its fragile body, and down my scope, I could see a black gem sticking out of one of its hind legs. I didn't overthink things and squeezed the trigger. The reaction was immediate. The monster began to writhe as large sections of its monstrous body went limp. Fury raised his hand, and the sonic burst ceased. What was that? Fury asked. Black gem, sir? Clint answered. Snipers, keep an eye out for that, and Dawn, crank up the volume. The sonic tanks went crazy, ramping up the volume and intensity. The air vibrated, and the beast in front of me shook and splintered as entire limbs popped up and evaporated. Only the black gem was left when Fury's guys were done. I shot at it with my rifle, earning another notification. You've defeated an Eldritch propagator. You've earned 60 red orbs. The kill brought my count to 242 red orbs, and I opened the Devil Arms tab, investing 100 red orbs in the weapon I'd had my eyes on for over a month. Rebellion, bonded, grade 1, first evolution, 0 out of 500 red orbs. Arbiter, unlocked, grade 1, first evolution, 0 out of 500 red orbs. Aquila, locked. Unlock for 500 red orbs. Eric's, locked. Unlock for 500 red orbs. Ophion, unlocked, grade 1, first evolution, 0 out of 500 red orbs. Ebony and Ivory, unlocked, grade 1, first evolution, 0 out of 500 red orbs. I was tempted to summon it immediately and give it a cheeky swing, but the propagators had other plans. The ground between the trucks burst open, and tentacles of shattered wood and black ooze. They lashed out, latching onto dozens of shield soldiers, and wormed their way into their bodies. Desperate screams ripped through the ranks, and I used burst to close the distance between me and a leaping tentacle aiming for a soldier. Rebellion materialized in mid-swing, severing the tentacle into 2. My hand shot out, grabbing a hold of the retreating tentacle, and I yanked hard. The ground beneath us shattered as I pulled the monster to the surface. Clint shot the bulbous mass below without prompt, causing the monster to shriek and squirm, but my grip grew tighter. With one final heave, I pulled it to the surface. The propagator had taken over the body of an overgrown mole, and had black ooze mixed with earth and with chunks for tentacles. With a disgusted scowl, I switched to Rebellion and ripped it to shreds with the trillion stabs. My hands blurred, and nearly 80 endurance points disappeared instantly. But when it was done, I'd shattered the gem animating the monstrosity. It fell limp, and I received a notification. Congratulations. You've defeated a lesser Eldritch Propagator. You've earned 30 red orbs. Nick Fury's POV, everything went to shit. 1 second, Donald had the monster on the ropes. The next, its buddies flanked us, but not from where we'd expected. 5 big tentacles broke to the surface and attacked agents. 3 caught people off guard. Natasha fired an overpowered Widow bite into the 4th one, holding it steady enough for Clint to rip it apart with an explosive arrow. Dante practically teleported to the 5th and cut it in half with a sword he summoned out of nowhere. Before I knew it, he and Clint were 2-timing the monster, and in a blink, it was dead. Dante pulled out a bullshit sword move from his ass that shredded the monster like tofu. Damn, I'll have to update our files on him. When Charles said he was exceptional with weapons, I expected some combat experience. Not whatever the hell that was. Donald, call the lab and have them triple reinforce the containment system. I hope we don't need it, but I'd like to be prepared just in case. As soon as the monster went down, the kid flickered again, appearing between 2 soldiers, and shoved them back. A modified gun with markings appeared in his hand, and he pointed it at the dirt while the whole world writhed around him. The other tentacles had successfully seized soldiers, and they charged Dante as one, even as units 2, 3, and 5 ripped into them with shotguns. Dante's gun glowed golden crimson, and a shot rang out, penetrating deep into the soil and eviscerating the monster below. I heard a shrill scream as the monster broke to the surface, writhing. Dante pulled out a second gun and began rapid firing while he bounced on his feet, gaining some distance from the monster. Lend the kid a hand. Take out the body, I yelled to Team 2. Donald, I called. Adjust the parameters again. Dante took the shot when the black gem in its main body revealed itself and faced the remaining tentacled monsters. He raised a hand again, and his gun slowly gathered energy as he dashed towards Natasha with a jump kick, removing the head of the puppet soldier she was beating back with her bow staff. I didn't need your help, she said, but since you're here, make yourself useful and help me distract it. Yes, milady. He smirked and dashed toward the monster. It swung its broken arm around, aiming a rifle at him. Dante summoned one of his own and fired before it did, shooting the gun out of its arm as he laid into the beast with a nasty sidekick to the knee, dislocating it. The bugger didn't even flinch. Instead, it unhinged its jaw and snapped at Dante. The kid danced back, his body flashing with dark red energy, and socked it in the jaw, lifting it off the ground. Exploiting the opening, Natasha pulled a dagger from her boot and swiped through the tentacle, separating the monster from a soldier. She leaped onto the coiling, retreating tentacle and shoved a live grenade into the oozing wound before backflipping off it and landing on the ground. An explosion sounded underground, tossing the monster to the surface. Dante summoned his other gun and ripped the monster to shreds, firing alongside every free gun on site. His charging gun went off, and the monster went limp. Clint followed Natasha's footsteps, and another died 30 seconds later. But the last one on the surface did something we'd not expect. It released the puppet soldier, who was bones at this point, and dove underground. A second later, the ground beneath us began to shake, and I knew we were in trouble. It was trying to combine with the monster that went underground after Natasha and Clint cut its tentacle. Shit, I swore. Everyone clear out. Donald, overload the sonic cannons. We can't let them finish. Dante POV, everybody gave the tanks a wide berth. Even Donald, Fury's right-hand man. I guess it wasn't Coulson's time yet. I was several meters away from the tanks when they went crazy. The air screamed, and even the specialty earpieces that Fury had us wearing could not completely protect us from the damage. A few soldiers lost their footing momentarily, and others put even more distance between the tanks. But I drew closer, summoning Rebellion and a grenade. When the monster broke to the surface, all hell broke loose. 3 giant wood, stone, and metal-covered tentacles snapped out of the ground, lashing wildly. It sent several tanks flying, driving our team further back. Fury let out a bastard and ordered the soldiers to fire. They punched holes through the tentacles, but the monster was still going strong. I threw a grenade at one of the limbs, completely devastating it. But to my surprise, one of the less injured tentacles scooped up dead soldiers and consumed them to regenerate its lost appendage. I watched in curious alarm. That's new. Bring that son of a bitch down, Fury roared, and his soldiers sprung into action, slotting grenades into the launchers attached to their guns. A few pulled out RPGs, and we fired as one, rocking the forest floor. The monster came to the surface with a sharp screech. It was an amorphous, bulbous thing with 3 huge tentacles, dozens of smaller ones, soldier limbs, guns, and a vague mole-shaped head. It towered over us, standing at nearly 12 feet, and rushed at us with surprising speed. "Scatter!" Fury ordered, and the soldiers bolted. My muscles tensed up as I considered my options. Fury's team needed breathing room to fight, and they wouldn't get that chance if the monster kept gobbling up soldiers. "Put some space between you and that thing, but don't stop shooting," Fury ordered. "Dante, can you hold that thing back?" I set my jaw and let out a sigh as I summoned Arbiter. "I'll take care of it." Rebellion morphed. Its handle grew as the blade shrunk and twisted into a rugged patchwork of sharp angles and edges. The axe blade was serrated and chunky and weighed triple what the sword did. Fury's eyes bulged. "The hell is that? Get your boys in place and be ready to provide cover fire when I ask for it." "Hey, ugly!" I yelled at the beast, who was about to corner a frazzled female agent. "Pick on somebody your own size." I spread my hands out. The monster paused, and its misshapen head snapped in my direction. It hissed, bucking as it slowly grew long and agile quadruped limbs, and lunged at me. I took off in a flash with demonic burst and packed Arbiter with so much energy that the rusty axe head sizzled. I raised my axe high, the weight damn near tripling, and came down on the thing's head. An explosion went off. It jerked the monster's head down, throwing it into the dirt, and I came down with another explosive strike, splitting its head in 2. I heard a screech, and 3 tentacles lashed out, but I was faster. Arbiter turned to Rebellion and parried 2 strikes while an explosive arrow diverted the 3rd, opening the beast up for a stinger strike to the face, followed by 2 quick licks. Angel Evade carried me behind it as it swung out with his claws, screeching in pain. I filled my blade with demonic energy and swiped at the base of a tentacle, cutting it clean off. A shriek and a body check sent me flying. The creature had reacted before its lost tentacle even hit the ground. I reacted equally fast, switching to Ophion, and Angel lifted myself back to the monster's body. I slammed into it with a stinger and twisted my blade, opening a deep wound. I summoned a live grenade with my free hand and chucked it inside the open wound. I used Angel Evade seconds before the retaliatory strike came. 2 tentacles packed with stone, adaptive armor, and would phase through me as I rematerialized on the ground. The explosion went off a second later, throwing the monster's body to the side, and I ran up to it, Arbiter glowing red, and slammed into its second tentacle, shearing through stone, metal, wood, and ooze. The body check followed before the tentacle touched the floor. But this time, I was ready, leaning out of reach while I had a demonic energy coat around me. My clever maneuvering earned me an instance of double damage that was quickly fading. So I set out to use it with extreme prejudice. I dashed at it and lopped the 3rd tentacle clean off. A mess of black tentacles came at me next, but I dodged them all with quick footwork and a demonic burst, earning myself another demonic evade bonus. The eldritch monster rapidly began to pulse and change, shifting to accommodate the lost biomass. It tried reaching for its downed tentacle, but could not reattach it, the demonic presence of Arbiter still lingering. While it was still panicking and reacting, I decided to end this fight and jumped into the air using burst. I propelled myself into the air a second time before I started filling Arbiter up with energy. I flashed downward, just as the propagator looked upward, slamming into it with the remainder of my freshly triggered demon evade bonus stacked on another burst. The results were explosive. The impact shattered the ground and reduced the monster to putty. The front half of its body was caved in, and it struggled against my burning demonic energy, wriggling, desperate to pull itself back together. Even though I was out of breath and disoriented, I noticed all of its movement and energy was coming from one singular bulge at the center of its back. I summoned Ebony and fired, shattering a huge black gemstone the size of a large apple. The propagator's body sloughed immediately, losing all form. It was still a bit startling that the combined propagators could get that big. It was probably because the hiding propagator had enough time to gather mass. Note to self: never let those slimy pricks hide away. You've killed a matured eldritch propagator. You've earned 200 red orbs. Quellatrax is not amused. Well, I'm not amused either, Quell. I snorted. There were a few other notifications, but Fury approached me before I could look at them. Is it over? Yeah, I panted, checking my resources. Name, Dante Sparda species, Nephilim class, none HP, 580/620 SP, 230/610 AE, 306/400 DE, 240/400 strength, 36 dexterity, 40 endurance, 61 vitality, 62 angelic energy, 40 demonic energy. 43 plus 2 Fury stood at the lip of the crater with Natasha and Clint. They all looked taken aback by the sight. I saw naked fear in Clint's eyes, and Natasha hid hers so well you almost couldn't tell. The professor sold you short, Fury said. I chuckled. That's the understatement of the century. Now, do you believe me when I say I'm here to help? We'd be in deep shit if you're not. The battle had taken less than 10 minutes, but all New York heard the explosions. Government vehicles, helicopters, and agents were called on site to push back the press and curious New Yorkers. Officially, the noise was caused by a localized weapon testing that got out of hand. Most didn't buy the story, but Fury left them little choice. I was led to a private trailer while paramedics attended to the injured. The fight had been brutal, and I was starting to feel bad about dragging Fury into this. Sure, I could have handled it alone, but those propagators were nasty. It wouldn't have come out of the fight without a few bruises. They would have overwhelmed me regardless of how many bombs and rifles I had in my weapons vault. If I was forced to retreat for whatever reason, I had a feeling Quell wouldn't stop. It might have been sneaky, but my decision to involve him ultimately benefited everybody. Quell's rift closed seconds after the last propagator died, and so did all traces of them. The black ooze they were made up of practically evaporated, leaving Fury nothing to work with or examine. Needless to say, that frustrated him quite a bit, almost as much as realizing that he had no real measure of my strength. Xavier gave him old information, and I've only ever cut loose a few times in the X-Men's presence. Thanks to my training, I was nearly 4 times as strong as a peak human athlete, putting my effective lifting strength at well over 1,000 kilograms on the bench press. My speed was even more impressive, and I was about to reach another stratosphere with my rewards. Congratulations on completing the second of 5 incursions. You've earned 1 key to Shin's multidimensional emporium. The store was finally open to me, and between all of the killing, I ended up with 402 red orbs. I wanted more, but I didn't get any orbs for that propagator that Clint killed. As eager as I was to spend my new red orbs, I couldn't help but take a look at Shin's store. The system interface turned golden when I entered it, and I swore I heard a trumpet sound in the background. The store was a lot more organized than I expected. Shin's wares were divided into classes, weapons, potions, skills, artifacts, tools, enhancements, bloodlines, abilities. Shin's list. I spent hours scrolling through each section, and my brain would have shorted out at the sheer possibilities were it not for how bloody expensive everything was. Every power, ability, artifact, and weapon you could ever imagine was in the store, even other systems. And they were locked behind astronomical red orb counts, or worse, world-specific currencies. A Zanpakuto was 20.3 million red orbs, or 30,000 Ken, Soul Society currency. The Yamato was 500 million red orbs. Daylight robbery, I tell you. I shook my head. I shouldn't have expected anything less from someone like Shin. I would need a world-ending fight like the Battle of New York to afford anything on the list. Even mutant abilities like pyrokinesis did not give me much hope. Beta-level abilities were worth 15 million per pop. Alpha-level abilities were 100 million, and Omega-level abilities were 500 million. The classes available were cheaper, but just as worrying. I had a long list available to me, the cheapest being just about 50,000 red orb. It was called Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and it came with useful skills like Tech Mastery, Adept Weapon Mastery, and Strategic Thinking. There was also a Serial Killer class, Weapons Master, Dojo Master, Bounty Hunter, and Eldritch Slayer. The last one was intriguing because it granted me a flat damage boost of 10% on all Eldritch monsters. Many other choices were grayed and unreadable with an interesting tag. Does not qualify. Others were even more expensive than the weapons, with price tags reaching the billions. However, one caught my eye out of the many available classes. It cost 100,000 red orbs and was the ticket to the top of Marvel's Earth's power scale. Dark Knight take on the title and mantle of the legendary Dark Knight Sparda, fully embodying the demon and becoming an emissary of his will and purpose. Peace between humans and demons. Grants 5 AGI 5 STR, 10 DE per level warning. Changes race to demon. You can only grow in strength by draining human blood. Skills. L. Swordsmanship. Wield the blade with the experience and power of a warrior who has fought 1,000 battles. L. Dark Knight Devil Arms. Inherit the legendary weapons of the Dark Knight by reaping the lives of demons. Devil Sword Sparda. Luz and Umbra. Force Edge. Rebellion Yamato. L. Demon Form. Unleash your inner demon, transforming into the demon Sparda. 5x to all physical stat and regeneration. I damn near frothed from the mouth after reading this. By level 8, I would be twice as strong as I currently was, with enough demonic energy to smother an apartment complex. Plus, it was not like I was using my angel energy for much besides healing and the occasional intangible dodge. Both functions could probably be substituted with purchases from the store. For example, Air Dragon Slaying magic cost 500 million demonic orbs, would fix the healing problem, and give me elemental manipulation of wind, the primary element my angel side had dominion over anyway. Still, the Nephilim race was a dark horse. In the store, it cost 2 trillion red orbs, and it was no wonder. Demons and angel hybrids were scarcely explored in fiction, but they were the overpowered race. They were the product of immortal celestial beings, and perhaps the only entities to reach true godhood in their lifetimes. Cutting off half of what made me unique seemed like too much of a sacrifice for power that I would have sooner rather than later. The Son of Sparda class tempted me, but it was a rainy day choice at best. At worst, it was a downgrade. I turned to the Devil Arm tab next, glad to find I had just enough red orbs to buy my first angel weapon. Osiris. It was a transformed ornate scythe with 2 handles, a thick shaft, and a long cursive blade. It cost 350 red orbs, and I was tempted to summon it immediately. Still, I knew better, realizing that my trailer was probably bugged. Instead, I settled for looking through the weapon list, bringing up their descriptions. Rebellion, bonded, grade 1, first evolution, 0 of 500 red orbs. A transforming longsword gifted to Dante by his father, Sparda, and a conduit for his bountiful demonic and angelic abilities. Abilities. Low-tier energy affinity, low-tier enhanced durability arbiter. Unlocked, grade 1, first evolution, 0 of 500 red orbs. An oversized battle axe and one of the 2 demonic forms of rebellion. Bears the primal force of eruption with each swing. Deals 2 times the damage rebellion does at the base. Damage and weight drastically increase with demonic energy. Abilities. Low-tier eruption and explosion manipulation. Low-tier weight manipulation. Osiris, unlocked, grade 1, first evolution, 0/500 red orbs. The first angelic form of rebellion, Osiris, is a light-speed scythe that delivers fast, reliable damage while allowing Dante to embody the weightlessness and agility of an angel. Deals 0.5 times the damage of rebellion, but moves 25% faster. Damage slowly accumulates with angel energy infusion and the innate feed ability. Abilities. Low-tier wind manipulation. Ebony and Ivory, unlocked, grade 1, first evolution, 0/500 red orbs, Dante's trademark pistols. Engineered to withstand Dante's superhuman speed and dexterity without ever seizing. Abilities. Low-tier energy bullets, low-tier enhanced durability. I just finished reading the last of my notifications and switching to my regular clothes when I heard the knock. The door eased open and Natasha peeked in. "Director Fury wants you." "Never said you could come in," I said, slipping on my shirt. I caught Natasha's eye lingering for a second too long. "It's nothing I haven't seen before, kid," Natasha said, ducking out. I followed after. "Oh, it's kid now. You might swing an axe as tall as you are, but you still look like you belong in high school. I think saving the world warrants an early graduation," I quipped as we arrived in front of a black SUV. Natasha nodded me in, but I had to get one last lick. "Tell me you didn't have as many bodies as I did when you were my age. You say that like it's a good thing." With a roll of my eyes, I entered Fury's SUV and found myself sitting across from the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. His intense eyes fixed on me, and he began. "Well, you said there was more you had to tell me. Let's hear it. What I am about to say is for the ears of your inner circle only," I began in a low voice. Fury raised a brow. The car is bullet and soundproof. No one else is listening. Well, that was not entirely true. Shin, the OAA, and a few other people could hear us if they wanted to. Captain America is alive. I watched for Fury's reaction, and it was priceless. His face lost all color, and his mouth twitched slightly before he finally spoke. You're not kidding, are you? Honestly, I expected more resistance. But having just proved myself to be a somewhat reliable clairvoyant, it would be short-sighted to ignore what I had to say, even if it sounded a bit nutty from his perspective. Unfortunately, I'm not, I said, leaning into the chair. Where is he? Where the world left him, I said. Underneath the ice. You can't mean. I shrugged. Call it magic, alien tech, or a miracle, but Cap's heart is still pumping. Fury was quiet for a moment before he spoke. You've told me how your eyes work. Unless you made a trip to the Arctic we don't know about, you shouldn't be able to know. I took a look at a history textbook, I said. Sometimes I need to look at the real thing before I know for certain, but other times a picture is enough. Which neatly brings me to the second revelation of the day. And you might want to hold on to something for this one. Fury muttered a curse under his breath and tapped one of the panels in his car. It opened up, revealing a minibar. There was an old bottle of scotch and some glass. Fury gingerly poured one for himself and took a sip. We were barely past noon, but I understood. It had been a long day. He likely spent the last hour justifying his mobilization of forces to the board and explaining what I was, a clairvoyant devil. I chuckled, just imagining their reactions. Nothing for your guest. I asked Fury. You're 19, and I've been killing demons since I was 5, and I just saved the planet. I think I'm a bit overdue for a drink. That's fair, Fury conceded. But I'm not fixing your drink. Pour it yourself. It was an odd issue to dig his heels down on, but I picked up the glass and poured one out anyway. I took a careful sip and savored it in quiet. God, I miss alcohol. Fury emptied his glass with a long swig. All right, out with it, he demanded. Hydra is alive, and they've infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. Fury's glass clattered to the floor in shock. Jean's POV. I sat at the professor's bedside, my mind swirling with a flood of complex emotions. The conversation between him and Dante played over and over in my head. It was hard to reconcile the vicious words I'd heard with the man lying in bed in front of me. He'd raised me after my parents passed and watched after every mutant that needed his help. Constantly peering into people's minds, I knew that everyone had an ugly side to them. Even Scott, even Professor Hank. But I never thought Xavier. A tear dropped from my cheek, landing on a patch of teal sheets covering Xavier. I was crying. I cradled my face, shoving back the tsunami of emotion threatening to spill out. The last time I was overcome with emotions like this, I nearly took down a section of Dante's domain. I wasn't sure the mansion would survive an episode. Are you okay, Jean? Scott's soft voice startled me. I turned around to see the panicked lower half of his face. All this is my fault, I heard Scott's mind say. I should have been here to protect you and the professor from him, he began, and Elle scowled. It didn't happen the way you think, I snapped. You're defending him. This is not about him, I said, walking up to Scott. I'm tired of you treating me like I'm the center of the universe. I'm stronger than every last mutant in this building. I don't need your protection, Scott. You weren't with us because I didn't want you there. But you wanted him? Scott demanded, and I nearly lost it. I could hear the pain in his voice, but I didn't care. He knows what I'm going through, I said. He understands what I am. And he showed me the truth about him, I said, pointing at the professor. If you heard the things he said. Scott motioned to hold my hand, but I pulled away. You can't let that thug inside your head, Jean. Thug. You have to see he's manipulating you if he has you questioning the professor, Scott said. Have you forgotten what he's done for us? I remember all too well. But the better question should be, what don't I remember? Scott raised a brow. What are you trying to say, Jean? The professor is the most powerful telepath we know. He can put most people to sleep with a thought, erase entire experiences from our minds, I said. I'm just questioning how much of our past is actually true. Scott had a startled look, but he doubled down. You can't really think. I know exactly what I think, I said. If he can get inside my head and put up a mental block, then what can he do inside your head, Logan's, or even the professor? He's like a father to me. But that doesn't mean he is a good man. I walked past Scott, stomping toward the door. Wait, Scott reached out to grab my hand, and in the next second, He was airborne. Scott crashed into the wall with a groan. I gasped. I hadn't meant for that to happen. I was angry, but not so much that I still couldn't talk to Scott. He needed to know what happened. The professor is poisoned, Scott, I said. I know you don't like Dante because you think he's trying to steal me away. What I am about to say is not for him, but for you and the other kids. The professor attacked first, not Dante. I saw everything with my own eyes. What? Scott blinked in surprise. His face flashed with a sudden horror before it was replaced by confusion and doubt. Shaking his head, Scott declared, No, he'd never do that. You've known the professor for nearly half of your life, and I've been at the mansion for years. You can't. It was my turn to be surprised. Didn't you hear me? I said I saw it happen. Scott opened his mouth and then shut it. His eyes glazed over momentarily before he started shaking his head again. There must be some explanation for this. It makes no sense. It was my turn to be confused. I tilted my head, staring at him. No, it doesn't. On a whim, I took a deeper look, no deeper than I'd gone before. And there it was. Xavier's imprint. Scott's mind had been tampered with. I followed the trail of Xavier's energy and felt for what he'd changed in Scott. It wasn't his memories or a mental block. It was far more insidious. Scott seemed to hold Xavier in higher esteem than just about anybody, even his parents. I gasped, taking several steps back. How long has this been going on? Who else did Charles have his claws in? Kitty? Colossus? Ileana? The staff? What's wrong, Jean? Scott said, slowly climbing to his feet, but I kept the distance between us. I was powerful now, but not nearly enough to undo whatever Charles did. I threw an angry look in his direction, biting my lip. Maybe Dante was right. I should have let him die. No, then I might have lost my biggest lead. I'm going to fix this, I said slowly, backing away from the door into the hallway. Scott reached out again, but I slammed the door shut with telekinesis and held it in place as I hurried away, my mind frantic. I turned around when I felt a familiar mind step into the opposite end of the hallway. Jean. It was Professor Hank. I can explain, I started. I strutted into an emptied-out warehouse at the docks in a sleek white suit. Under a flickering fluorescent light, a familiar figure waited for me. Quite the predicament you've placed us in, Wilson, I said evenly. At some point, you'll have to find a more permanent solution for our vigilante problem. I will never understand your kind's obsession with tights. I was furious, but I hid it well. Remaining unreadable was an asset in all areas of business, whether you were dealing with demons or humans. For once, this is not on my kind, Fisk rumbled, handing me photographs of a masked man zipping around a large room with red and blue streaks accompanying him. I thought you said you controlled the demons in New York. I do, I said, without ever looking up. I recognized him immediately. Dante, the second son of Sparda. Father would be over the moon if he knew I found him. Last I heard, he was an untrained wastrel, pouring his likely infinite life away. A lot could change in a month. Maybe you're not nearly as powerful as I thought, Fisk said in his slow, unhurried voice. Do you know what your pride has cost us, Isha? Wilson's rage bled through his words. Like me, he had a masterful poker face. To answer Wilson's question, Sparda's son just cost us months of work and a ridiculous amount of money. We would have to purchase Hell's Kitchen's properties at a considerable markup and further delay Father's goals for the New York sanctum. I narrowed my eyes at Wilson. I could understand his anger, but I could not abide the insult from a lesser. I'll deal with the matter personally, I said, walking up to the blubbery giant, and pay the difference in cost. But my dear Wilson, if you ever raise your voice to me again, it will be the last thing you do. My eyes flashed bright crimson as I summoned one of my 2 devil arms, talons of white gold and fire. The temperature in the room skyrocketed, and I held Wilson's gaze, delighting as he stepped back in awe and fear. His tie caught fire, and he hurriedly removed it and tossed it, fixing me with a startled glare. The sight would have been perfect if he were on his knees. Don't forget yourself, Wilson, I said as I turned around and vanished into the night. Remind me why I need to learn this again. I asked Natasha as I flipped through a thick book on programming. Don't get me wrong, I loved computers as much as the next guy, but understanding and working on the back end was not just my thing. I was more of a punchy punch guy, as you've probably seen. You don't have much of a choice, Clint said. You gotta know your way around all sorts of security systems and computers if you want to be an agent. Contractor, I insisted. The deal I was discussing with Fury before he ran off was that I was supposed to be his shotgun, not tech support. Do you think we get to call in tech support when we're stuck in the field with no way out? Natasha asked. You won't be much use to Fury if you can't hack your way past a door or spoof a basic security camera feed. You may be strong, but you can't cleave your way out of everything with your axe. Want to bet? I smirked, and Natasha walked over to me, leaning in. Why didn't you cut your way through the X-Men that night you ran into them at the warehouse? I raised a brow. She knew about that. Of course she did. She was Natasha Romanoff. Or why did you run when S.H.I.E.L.D. came after you that night after you fled L.A.? She said. You talk tough, but I know it's all an act. You're smarter than you look. Otherwise, you wouldn't have lasted this long. The corners of my lips twisted in amusement. Game recognized game. So when we tell you this is important, you listen, she finished, and Clint whistled. I raised my hands in mock surrender. Fine, fine. I'll learn how to code, but only if you teach me how to lie and profile like the best of them. Natasha looked surprised, and Clint laughed. You're something else, kid. I can't believe you tried to sucker Natasha. I leaned back in my seat with a self-satisfied smirk, and Natasha sat down on the table where I'd dumped my textbook. If that's what you want, it's fine. Though, it's a shame it will be a waste of both of our time, she shrugged. Humans are 10 times more complicated than any computer. I mean, if you're struggling with basic computer science. She trailed off. Are you sure you don't want to learn about guns or surveillance? That seems more your speed. I laughed internally. Did she think that would work on me? Where did all that enthusiasm for me to learn how to code go? I chuckled. We all have our strengths, Natasha shrugged. How about we have a little wager? I smirked. If I can bypass the security system by the door in 3 months, you must teach me everything you know. Lock-picking, interrogation, negotiation, stealth, and information gathering, the 9 yards. You have to make me a super spy. Natasha's brow hiked up her beautiful face as she grappled with what she was hearing. You do realize that we have one of the most advanced security systems in the world. No one can start from scratch and pick up coding that fast. Then, there's no reason why you should not agree, I said with a shrug. What do I get if I win? Natasha said, folding her hands after giving it some thought. My eyes flashed red, and I smirked, wiping the confident look off Natasha's face. I leaned in close, whispering low enough that Clint couldn't hear us. Your sister. Natasha's face immediately went white. Fury walked into the apartment, interrupting the game of cards I was playing with Clint. I was taking a short break after working my way through a quarter of the first book Natasha provided. She'd stepped out after my jaw-dropping revelation and hadn't been back. We were playing poker, and the archer was cleaning me out. It seemed I'd finally run into something I was not immediately good at. Lucky for me, I had the foresight to not bet with actual money. We were using fake chips. When he saw us playing, Fury nearly blew a gasket. Let me get this straight. While I'm out there trying to see if we're about to be overrun by Nazi squids, you're playing poker. Clint said it'd help me bluff better, I said, pointing at the archer, whose eyes bulged at the betrayal. You asked for the lesson. Because I'm so clearly terrible at lying, I said, turning to Fury. The bit about Alexander Pierce was true, wasn't it? Son of a... Fury trailed off, massaging his brow. He switched out the transport team that was supposed to be escorting a vehicle I suggested you might have been in. I tailed them from afar. It never made it to the S.H.I.E.L.D. site before it was ransacked. I got a call from Pierce afterward, asking where you were. The commander? Hydra, really? Clint asked, his voice tainted with more sadness than disbelief. Wasn't excited about it either, Fury said, but the kid was right. Again, I smirked, but didn't let the flattery distract me. Where did you tell Pierce I was? Tucked away in a safe house where we were trying to get you to join S.H.I.E.L.D. The truth, while we're on the topic of joining S.H.I.E.L.D., we still need to finalize our terms. All I want is to provide you with intel and muscle for special cases in exchange for wiping my slate clean and setting me up with a pad, state-of-the-art equipment. And of course, cheddar. Seems pretty fair to me. And I told you there's only so much I can authorize for an external contractor, Fury said. I can't give you all that and protect you from Hydra. So, what you're saying is that there's a price too great for saving the world. No, I'm saying you're an unknown Dante. Unknowns make me and the council nervous. Knowing those old coots, they'll probably feel safer having you locked up somewhere you can't cause trouble. But after today's invasion, I know that'll probably come back to bite us in the ass sooner rather than later. If you join SHIELD. No, I said immediately. It was like a knee-jerk reaction, but Fury pressed on with an irritated look. If you join SHIELD, I can justify all those expenses and keep you insulated from Pierce. With the right team build, you can produce results and shut down all protesters. It was a half-truth. I saw the flaw in his reasoning, and if he was the man I knew he was, so did he. I was part demon. All it took was one slip-up from the other half-demons on the planet, and I was in the doghouse. Hell, my position would be shaky if any superpowered person stepped out of line, which was guaranteed to happen since this was the Marvel Universe. Besides, I already had somebody puppeting me. I refused to have another. I want to help you, Fury, I said, standing up. But I won't live under your thumb. I'd rather see it all burn down. You want my help with Hydra, Quellatrax, and the dozen other threats coming. I remain a contractor for SHIELD, at least unofficially. You can forge my registration papers and do what you must to make it look legitimate. But these are my terms, and I'm not budging. Fury frowned. Why go through the trouble of faking it if you're going to be SHIELD in every way that matters? Because I know how all of this ends, I said. They're going to ask for me. And on that day, you'll remember I was not yours to hand over to begin with. Silence. I'll draw up the fake paperwork, Fury said. Welcome to SHIELD. After helping me fill out the paperwork, Fury went into detail about how my actual time with SHIELD would operate. Natasha, Clint, and a few agents would instruct me in safe houses designed to contain and test high-powered individuals like myself. In other words, superhero prison. To say I wasn't worried about these sites would be a lie. But I was certain Fury would not betray me so soon after we signed our agreement. Hopefully. While I was in training, it was agreed upon that I would also get assigned missions to handle special case missions, aka other superhumans. I also got a small apartment a few minutes away from the training facility and a base salary. It was $100,000 a year after taxes, plus $20K to $50K for every mission I completed successfully. It was more money than I ever made as an MMA fighter, but I still felt underpaid, considering the risk I would be taking every time I faced a superpowered individual. Finally, my time was mine when we weren't training or on missions. All they asked was for me to wear a trackable watch and a standard-issue SHIELD phone so Fury could always reach me when he needed to. As soon as Fury came through with the paperwork, I received my SHIELD badge and swaggered out of the safe house and into the apartment they'd set up. It was fully stocked with modern amenities, which I obviously ripped out and sold. Even if I couldn't say whether they were bugged, I preferred to do my own interior design. There are new couches, electrical work, and the 9 yards. It took a week to sort out, and I saw SHIELD's detainment site turned training facility. There were empty rooms designed to withstand the near-titanic amount of power I could now dish out. It had machines and weight stations that could support thousands of pounds of weight, high-speed treadmills that put the facilities at conventional gyms to shame, and all manner of weapons. Devil Hunter weapon mastery was among the few aces I revealed while talking to Fury. Watching Clint swear whenever I hit a bullseye with a bow was particularly entertaining. I put off practicing with my demon and angel weapons in front of them, until I unlocked Tequila and Eric's. I preferred to let SHIELD think I couldn't summon my weapons on a whim. It also meant I needed a private space to train myself. For now, I showed SHIELD more of what I could already do, drilling my aim with guns on sight, practicing with various weapons, and spamming focused shots and demonic bursts as often as I could while I blitzed through obstacle courses. The plan was to reach adept tier in both techniques. 1 week after I started training SHIELD, I took a train into New York proper, with my hair dyed black, of course, and a hat to hide my features. Fury had said Pierce would back off for now because I was officially in the system, but you could never be too sure. Besides, he was not the only one I'd managed to piss off. The Hand, the X-Men, and the Brotherhood still wanted my ass. And while I was confident in handling the Hand to an extent, the other two were debatable. I came to a stop in front of a familiar building. It was a brownstone in Manhattan, and the New York branch of the Sorcerers of Earth. It looked unassuming, but with a flash of my devil's eye, I saw through the tapestry of illusions. Congratulations. Devil Eye has reached adept level, can now better perceive energy and pierce through illusions. The upgrade caught me unawares. I hadn't even known I was close to the upgrade, but I took it in stride nonetheless. I walked up the stairs, and my knuckles rapped on the door frame. There was no response. I was about to knock again when I saw it. Golden energy surged in a circle around my feet. Burst carried me far back in time to escape the portal, bumping into a young lady. I was about to offer an apology when the world splintered, and a wave of energy swept by me. Suddenly, I was alone, standing on a street, and above me, I saw a mirror of the street I was on, but it was completely deserted. Several identical streets meshed into the first one, forming a strange hexagon of parallels. I recognized it immediately. The mirror dimension? Whatever happened to bloody diplomacy? You're certainly bold to come here, a voice boomed across from me. It came from a bald black man in flowing golden robes who'd not been standing there a minute ago. He was flanked by 10 other sorcerers, glaring at me in malice. Look, guys, this is some big misunderstanding. I need to talk to the Sorcerer Supreme. So it was ignorance that has brought you here, not confidence, the man said, assuming a martial stance. Twin mandalas of golden light manifested on his fists. Couldn't we, talk this out first? I said with an awkward smile. The man glared at me. No. Strings of golden whips lashed out at me from all angles, and I immediately used demonic burst. My entire body blurred as I was catapulted forward, dancing and snaking through a labyrinth of golden chains, twisting and bending. Another burst brought me half a step away from the stunned lead sorcerer's face. I was about to grab the trigger-happy bastard when the world around me suddenly inverted. Gravity went topsy-turvy, and suddenly, I was flopping through the air. The main sorcerer clapped his hands, forming strange mandalas that shone with deep crimson energy. Oh, that didn't look good. Bands of Sidorak, he whispered as he threw his hand forward, sending the whips in my direction. With a frantic prompt, I summoned Osiris and spun it in front of me to generate a basic buffer, pumping tons of angel energy into the weapon just as the bands crashed into me. The force sent me spinning, but oddly, the bands never made it past the wall of energy. They flew in every which way, slamming into other sorcerers and windows. One thick band even lashed at the lead sorcerer's head. I saw the slight panic in his eyes as he leaned out of the way, and I moved again. But this time, I wasn't going for the head honcho. It was the 10 others who escorted him. My body turned an ethereal blue before it vanished, reappearing in front of a sorcerer. A punch dug into his gut, half force, punting him a fair distance. Somebody yelled something as I came down with a spinning axe kick on the second guy. A mandala shield sprung to life at the last possible second as a portal opened underneath me. But I was ready this time. A burst threw me backward, and another launched me forward with Arbiter in hand. The first strike had the mandala flickering, but the second never came as I angel evaded away just in time to avoid a concentrated beam of red energy. Another beam followed, and then a third and finally a fourth. I dodged everyone, but was growing increasingly worried at their ferocity. If these bastards kept going like this, I might be forced to actually take this fight seriously. I had the feeling that the Ancient One would be less willing to hear me out if I killed some of her sorcerers. Thankfully, the leader took the time to gloat before escalating the fight further. It was foolish of you to come here alone, demon brat, he said. You should know better than to approach a sanctum. Have you forgotten that we are at war? It was a real struggle not to react when I heard the news. Of course, they were at freaking war, dumbass. The sorcerers of Earth were created to protect the world from threats outside our dimension. Belasco and his Nephilim spawn fit that bill perfectly. Sparda's memory hadn't mentioned a conflict, but I would assume they've been fighting for centuries. What was more dangerous than a half-demon, half-human that could get by Agamotto's protection spell? Given all of this context, the bald sorcerer guy was right. It was incredibly stupid approaching the sanctum as I did, but I've talked my way out of worse situations. Of course I've not, I snorted. Seeing the Ancient One is just that important. I bring news of a threat that can end the Earth if it's not dealt with delicately. Lies, one bald sorcerer yelled, clutching his stomach. It's demon trickery. When I squinted my eyes, he looked oddly familiar. The leader silenced him with a wave, but seemed to agree with his enthusiastic underling. We are guardians of the Earth, and we have no knowledge of the threat you speak of. You might not, I said, but your boss might. The news I bring is too sensitive for the ears of anyone but Yao. I saw the man's eyes grow wider as I casually dropped the name of the Ancient One. Who are you? He asked. The name is Dante. The bald sorcerer seemed to examine me for a long second before he waved his hand. forcing the other sorcerers to stand down reluctantly. I am Daniel Drum, master of the Sanctum Sanctorium, and I will relay your message to her. But understand this. If you step out of line, there will be no warning, only retribution. I've got chills, I smirked, but I got the idea loud and clear. I'm here to talk, not fight. Drum said nothing and waved his hand, and suddenly, we were standing in the Sanctum Sanctorium. The interior was spacious, with old fixtures, rugs, floorboards, and glass cases with strange artifacts hanging midair. Wow, I muttered as I spun, trying to take it all in. Wait here, he said. 7 of the 10 sorcerers that had fought with him opened golden gateways that they stepped into, leaving me with 2 men and 1 woman, all with pronounced snarls on their faces. The angriest of the trio was the man who'd spoken up against me. I was now also realizing that he'd been the sucker I'd punched earlier. No wonder he was a bit miffed. My first instinct was to apologize, but I had a feeling that would only make things worse, so I settled for just standing there awkwardly. Luckily, I didn't have to wait long for the Ancient One to arrive. She elected to startle like a proper master of the mystic arts. You certainly know how to make an entrance, Dante Sparda. A voice sounded from behind us. None of us had even seen the portals she'd come through. Ah well, I aim to please, I said. I'm just glad we could talk things out before things got more serious. I will relay to Master Drum that you're grateful for his restraint. I smirked. I saw what Yao did there. Sorcerer Supreme. All 3 sorcerers took a deep bow in her presence. Like the movies, the Sorcerer Supreme was a bald woman who looked past her prime. But her face differed notably from the actress who played her. It was another reminder that I could not fully rely on my knowledge from the MCU. Sooner rather than later, I would encounter a notable change that I could not predict. I'll take it from here, the Ancient One said, dismissing the rest of the sorcerers. They disappeared in a glowing fiery portal, and my eyes followed them with no small measure of curiosity. That will never not be cool, I said to Yao. It's the small things that keep the joy of the practice alive, Yao said with a warm smile. I suppose you know why I am here, I said, scratching my cheek. Surprisingly, I'm not entirely sure, she said, circling me with intrigue in her eyes. The future has never been a mystery for me. I foresaw your birth decades before your father met your mother. And I know everything will happen every minute of every day until the day I die. Takes the excitement out of living, doesn't it? I said to a contemplative Ancient One. I suppose you could say that, but there was a kind of certainty that came with always knowing. She mused, then turned to face me. All that changed 2 months ago. You went from a reckless teenage overdue for some comeuppance to an obscured player whose every action destroys and creates timelines. I cringed, paralyzed by panic. Oh, I said slowly. Yao could kill me if she wanted to, and her age suggested she wouldn't hesitate to. No one stayed Sorcerer Supreme for centuries without developing a killer's instinct. Still, she didn't strike me as the dramatic type who'd give a speech before offing their enemy. In all likelihood, she just wanted to keep me alive and talking. For now, my presence obscuring the future also explained why Yao didn't see me coming. I am sorry about that. I didn't know. The Ancient One waved off my apology. How would you, she said. Honestly, I don't know whether to thank or eliminate you. On the one hand, the demons have noticed the change, but on the other, our future was not all that pleasant to begin with. I laughed awkwardly. And here I thought you would ease me into things. You thrive on the edge. Skirting the issue would have been a waste of both of our times, she said. You want me to fight the demons, I concluded. A month ago, I would have said it was too dangerous, but I was just watched you change a major inflection point. The Phoenix Avatar was not supposed to begin unraveling her bond for another 5 years. Unraveling. I didn't like the sound of that, but there was no putting that genie back in the bottle. I'd been the one to approach Jean and promised I could help her. The least I could do was be a man of my word. About Jean, is there anything you can do for her? I asked. We both know just how bad things will get if we leave her to her devices. The Ancient One considered me. The Phoenix Force is beyond what you or I can comprehend. The only hope Jean has of staying her emergence is communing with her and coming to some sort of compromise. I frowned. I'd hoped for more, but I'll take what I can get. Can you help her do that? Commune with the Phoenix? I can, she said with some hesitation, but it's ultimately up to Jean. I know you care deeply for her, but she was never meant to survive. In every permutation of our future I've explored, Jean always dies. whether at the hands of the Wolverine, her lover, Scott, or by her own hand. It is brave that you're trying to save her from her fate, but it might be out of your hands. My throat went dry. Shit. The Ancient One saw the fear in my eyes and spoke. But remember, nothing is set in stone anymore, she said. You made sure of that. I nodded, already having a clue of what had to happen. The only problem was that it would be challenging and costly. My plan involved obtaining the Yamato, several purchases from Shin's store, and liberal use of the Infinity Stones. But is she worth all that? A voice said at the back of my head. She betrayed you the first chance she got. You need to bring her in immediately if you hope to stay the Phoenix's emergence, Yao said, bringing me back into the moment. Now that she's become aware of the Phoenix, it will attempt to reach out and meld with her mind. Jean must learn to resist her influence, or she will become just as destructive as the Phoenix. Crap. On it, I said, pulling up my cell phone and dialing her number. Long seconds passed as her cell rang. DANTE. Jean's voice shivered when she picked up the call. Jean. A knot formed in my chest. Help. Her voice suddenly cut out, followed by a sharp static. I turned to the Ancient One, but she had already formed a portal behind me. But oddly, it didn't lead to the mansion. It opened in an alley beside the SHIELD facility where I now trained. I gave her an incredulous look. You need help, she said. Get it before you head into a potentially deadly situation. I didn't bother asking how she knew about my relationship with SHIELD after telling me she couldn't see my future. You're all the backup I need. I insisted. I cannot be there. There's something truly urgent that requires our order's attention, Yao said. More urgent than the destruction of our planet. The demons have grown even more bold, she said. They've mounted attacks on sorcerer communes worldwide. New York is safe, though, so I can spare Daniel. He'll be glad to hear from you again. Until then, I think you should talk to SHIELD. It's time your employers learned about the threat of Jean Grey. Are you sure there's no other way we can play this? Fury will blow a gasket when he finds out that an Omega-level mutant has been possessed by a transdimensional fire chicken. Yao chuckled. He will. In fact, the entire world will, but it will not matter in the grand scheme of things. Like you said, Jean is the avatar of a transdimensional primordial. She is no danger except from the thing inside of her. The fallout of the Phoenix's exposure will be world-changing. Xavier will never recover from this, and Jean might be forced to leave the X-Men forever. People will know about and hunt for her, and the only place they will be safe on the planet will be with the sorcerers. Fine, I grumbled, stepping through the portal she opened, but I don't know how you expect me to sell them on letting the sorcerers hold her. I'm sure you'll think of something. Yao smiled as the portal winked behind me. I stepped into Fury's office the moment I entered the base, much to the consternation of a blustering secretary. We need to. Fury was in the middle of a conversation with Natasha and Clint, and behind them was a large board with pictures and cutouts about assassinations, super soldiers, and Captain America. There was a question mark on top of a familiar name. Bruce Banner. Do you see something? Fury asked, and I considered my answer for a moment. The Hulk does go on to cause untold destruction, but he is also a quintessential Avenger. Prevent his creation, and I could save a lot of lives and eliminate a potentially powerful adversary before they were born. But then again, could Earth survive the Battle of New York and all of the subsequent threats without the Hulk? Maybe, but how could I benefit from all of this? I scanned the room as a plan began to form. Don't keep us in suspense, Natasha asked. The director asked you a question? I narrowed my eyes, making a concerted effort to ignore the snark. Do you trust me, Fury? I asked. Not as far as I can throw you, kid, he answered, and I chuckled. Do you trust that I am self-interested enough to avert a potentially world-ending crisis? That got Fury's attention. Well, out with it. Remember my little stint at Xavier's mansion? I didn't only stay for the hospitality. I met one of the most powerful mutants alive. Fury had a surprised look on his face, and then shook his head. There's never a dull moment with you, is there? I shrugged. Anyways, I just got off the phone with her, and something is very wrong. The last time I saw her, she was wrapping up what was left of Xavier's hand. Clint and Natasha seemed to raise a brow at the comment. What happened between you and the old man? Fury asked. Let's just say Xavier's title of most powerful telepath alive is not for show, I said. He tried to mind rape me, and things didn't quite work for him. Jean was not as lucky when he invaded her mind a decade ago. She was apparently so powerful when he found her that the only way he could calm her down was to seal her memories and powers. Those seals kept her relatively weak, but recently they've been unraveling, I carefully said. She likely reached a tipping point after watching Charles try to lobotomize me, but still stuck around because she cares about him. I grimaced. I'm afraid Charles will try to put a lid on Jean's powers again. Jesus, Fury muttered. I saw the conflict in Natasha's eyes. On the one hand, she didn't like me or wanted to pity me, but on the other hand, nobody deserved what I'd got. Isn't that a good thing? Clint asked the more pressing question. If she's as volatile and powerful as you said, won't it be better if she was contained? Ordinarily, yes, I admitted. The problem with that is that Jean is far too powerful for a measly telepathic seal. She can level a quarter of New York with a wave of her hand. Fury, Natasha, and Clint blanched. So, I take it tactical elimination is off the table, Clint said. Not unless you're suicidal, I scoffed. She's an all-powerful telekinetic and telepath. She could probably atomize the bullet before it reached her, or wipe us out the moment she senses hostility. And you're certain you're not blowing this way out of proportion? Fury asked. If anything, I'm lowballing it, I said. Jean has the kind of power that will make atom bombs look like grenades. We cannot mess this up. If we're not neutralizing her, what's your plan? Natasha asked. You can't tell me you're banking on your personal relationship to unarm a walking nuke. I grinned. That's exactly what I'm doing. She's in a mansion filled with people who've been brainwashed by her surrogate father. I'm the only guy she can trust because I resisted him. As soon as I get through to her, I already have a solution lined up. What's this solution? Natasha asked. And what if you're not as charming as you think you are? I am. I smirked, then turned to Fury. The alternative is pissing Jean the hell off. We can't hold her, and we won't be able to kill her unless she lets us. I called in a favor with a sorcerer who can help her learn control somewhere far away from here. Sorcerer. Natasha raised a brow. You can't really be considering this, Director? Fury had a contemplative look before he turned to Clint. Get the RX-29 just in case. As for the sorcerer, it's no stranger than hiring a 19-year-old clairvoyant to predict the future for us. I will need to meet this cat myself first, though. Clint departed the room to fulfill his order, and I nodded to Fury. I'll set up the meeting with Drum. I think you'll get a kick out of meeting him. I understood the need for the meeting and high-tech rifle. I wouldn't leave the fate of the world to the whims of a teenager, too. My only fear was that they'd piss off the Phoenix and not Jean. Just don't be overeager to call in that strike. Jean is an emotionally distraught teenager with the power of a god. She'll lash out if you give her a reason to. I know that you're confident in your visions, but there's no way in hell I'm treating a potential threat with kid gloves, Fury said. I'd not be a very good director if I did. I sighed, shaking my head. Maybe I should have just left well enough alone and not told Jean about her silent partner. But Shin didn't seem like the patient type. He never gave me a timeline, but I was damn sure I was on a clock. Will you take the nuclear option off the table if I told you I had another way to isolate Jean quickly if the situation called for it? The sorcerer? Natasha offered. Yup, I nodded. He can make portals. Like that eldritch thing? Fury raised a brow. Different, I said slowly, making a mental note never to tell Fury the name of the branch of magic the sorcerers practice. He can basically transport her to the Arctic with enough preparation. Now I really want to meet him, Fury said. Can he route one of his portals to our containment sites? I don't know, I lied. You'll have to talk to him yourself. But I'd like to remind you that you'll be putting us all in danger if you try to keep her. Fury stared at me for a moment before he nodded. The Arctic it is, but I'd like a serious discussion with the walking nuke once she's settled. And that is non-negotiable. I nodded. I'll go get Drum. I was about to leave for the sanctum when Fury waved me back. Prep for the op, Natasha. Get the standard meta-suppressing kit. Knockout grenades, high-voltage bullets, foam. You know what I like. And keep the team small. On it, Director. She nodded and left the room, then Fury turned to me. I'm going to need you on the call with Xavier. We're going to use your blackmail to twist his arm. If what you're saying is true, then your leverage might expire tonight. Shit. In the chaos of it all, I hadn't put it together. You're probably right. Xavier has a lot of friends in high places. He's not the type of person we can move on without solid information. So, what do you have on him exactly? I set my jaw as the memories came back. A recording of him admitting to brainwashing his ward and trying to melt my brain. Fury's single eye went wide. You weren't exaggerating when you said he tried to lobotomize you? Pulled no punches, I said. Had blood leaking from my eyes, nose, and everything. Fury looked at me like I had 5 heads. How are you still alive? I heal fast, I shrugged. I guess that's one more secret you know about me. There was a small stretch of silence. You have the tapes with you? I smiled and summoned a shotgun with a tape recorder duct taped to the bottom. Never go anywhere without it. I slowly extracted it and gingerly handed it to Fury. He slipped it into an odd cassette player in the corner of his office, and his face went through a wide range of emotions before finally settling on rage. It was a feeling I was intimately familiar with. Got what you need? That and a whole lot more, Fury said. Then let's go save the world. Charles' POV. I sat shivering in my seat, dabbing away yet another layer of sweat from my brow as I threw back my 3rd pair of aspirin for the night. Penetrating Jean's mind was proving impossible. Yet, I had to do it for my sake, for the children's sake, for all of our sakes. We kept her on in 4 drip, limb restrained, head fitted with a psychic energy inhibiting crown to make sure she couldn't use her abilities. Yet it hadn't been enough. About 30 minutes ago, Jean willed herself awake. Hank was unsure how that was even possible. We'd loaded her with so much sevoflurane and cyclopropane that we thought she was dead. She willed her phone over the moment her eyes snapped open, and it rang a second later as if she was expecting the call. She managed to get a word out before Scott, who was in the room, lasered the phone, but the damage was done. Dante was coming. Getting her down a second time proved far more difficult than the first, even though Jean couldn't use her abilities much. She was supernaturally strong, seemed to absorb Cyclops' laser when I ordered him to fire, and even sent Wolverine flying with a swipe of her hand. Kitty had been the one to take her down by sneaking up behind her and jamming a potent cocktail into her neck. But the monster inside Jean refused to be contained. Psychic energy exploded from her body when Beast tried to secure her after, blanketing the entire mansion. A few things happened at once. All the windows exploded inward, bathing us in glass shards that never fell to the ground. Everything that was not glued down, including people, shot to the ceiling and remained there. The walls groaned and moaned like an ancient beast bearing its maw. Bits and chunks of flooring and masonry broke off as cracks several feet wide sprung from the floor and climbed up the walls. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, hell descended. The temperature shot through the roof, and I felt fear, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Despite everything, I refused to abandon Jean or relent. Only Hank and I were left in the room. My furry companion was substantially more durable than I was. He could take the heat. Trying to go back into Jean's mind was like sticking my arm into a furnace. The monster found me immediately. You dare. I heard a voice shriek out in indignation, and I nearly soiled myself. Sweet Mary and Joseph. Dante was right. You overstep, Aunt. I will not let you take a child of mine. I mentally screamed back despite my fear. Surprisingly, the monster chuckled. Each syllable shook the mansion. Blood poured from my lips, nose, and ears as her presence blanketed me. For your hubris, Xavier, your life is forfeit. It pronounced, then subsequently receded. I collapsed to the floor and remained there for a long moment. Charles, Hank called. Charles, he repeated. Are you all right? I've been better, I croaked. I don't know how to fix this. I should have never asked you to do what you did. Hank gulped and adjusted his glasses. She was erratic and lashing out. If I hadn't sedated her, she would have endangered herself and the rest of the children. It is regrettable that the chips fell where they did, but you had good intentions. If only I hadn't forced the matter with Dante, I sighed. But that boy drove me up the damn wall. Hank said nothing, giving me the moment I needed to gather myself. He helped me into my chair. For a moment, I considered my options. I asked Hank to increase the anesthesia dose and the intensity of the psychic blocking headband. Logan, Aurora, Scott, and Piotr trooped in a moment later. Hell is going on, Prof? Logan asked. Did you find a new mutant? Aurora asked, but Scott put it together immediately. It was Jean, wasn't it? She has grown more willful. What's wrong with her? Piotr asked. She's been overtaken by something truly vile, I said. And I don't know if I can help her. It was him, wasn't it? Scott snapped. Jean started acting strange the day he showed up. He infected her. Hank and I shared a look. He was about to open his mouth when I spoke into his mind. He's right, you know. I've watched that seal for nearly 2 decades, and there was no sign of a break. And yet in the first month of him living with us, she starts to lose herself. You and I know that's not the whole truth. Hank thought at me with a frown. He'd been prudent enough to hear Jean out after she stormed out of the med bay. By the time I was lucid enough to connect to Hank's mind, he regarded me with heavy suspicion. He knew that Dante's eyes saw her buried power, and the young devil had planted the seed that she might have been brainwashed. Given the boy's track record and my blunder, Jean had her mind already made up, as did Hank. He had even begun to buy into the narrative that I'd brainwashed the children. If you could think that of me, Hank, then perhaps you never knew me, I said. I would never harm the children or X-Men, nor would I be able to control them for a prolonged period like she's claiming. All I did was make Jean forget some of her past and seal her boundless strength. Continuous mind control is another thing entirely. It is frankly beyond my abilities, and likely the abilities of most mutants alive. Well, except for maybe Jean. Swear to me, Charles, that the boy's claims about you weren't true. Swear to me, Hank demanded in a terse voice. My first instinct was to play off the promise as some unfair breach of trust, but I saw the desperation in Hank's eyes. I would lose him if he didn't like the next words out of my mouth, so I lied. Hank had not agreed to my plan to sedate her until he had my promise. I erected a mental shield the entire time we had our conversation, and Hank led her to his lab. He injected her after I sent a sharp mental spike through her mind, disorienting her. He apologized several times as she collapsed to the floor after our second exchange with her. You are right, I thought to Hank. The matter is not black and white, but we need the team focused and united, now more than ever. He will be coming for her, and we must be ready. As if the universe were mocking me, the phone rang. The room became pinprick silent as the ringtone of my tossed cell phone filled the quiet. Scott slowly handed it to me, and I thanked him before tentatively putting it to my ear and answered. You left a lot out of our last conversation, Charles. Fury, I began. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. I thought you were a decent man, Charles, but mind-controlling children. I'm going to give you one chance and one chance only. We were coming for the girl. Let us retrieve and appropriately contain her. I noticed Hank and Logan's faces when Fury mentioned mind control. Their mutations allowed them to listen in easily. I had to choose my words carefully. You mean kill her? I said loud enough for everybody in the room to hear. Scott gasped, and Bobby, who just joined, looked more lost than ever. Kitty Pryde looked livid. Of course not, Fury said. Our consultant told us attempting that would be tantamount to suicide. He has a sorcerer on the ground that can help her stabilize her mind. Sorcerer? I scoffed. This is Dante's doing. He's selling you on fairy dust and tall tales. I'm the foremost telepath on Earth. If anyone can help Jean, it's me. After all that fine work you did pushing her over the edge? Dante's voice cut in. Nah, I think I'll take it from here. If you don't want our little conversation going viral online, you'll roll out the welcome mat when we get there. I set my jaw as I considered my options for a hot moment. I needed to protect the family regardless of the consequences. I could bounce back from the tape leak. I didn't think I would survive losing them all. Besides, Logan and Hank would lose all respect for me if I let the boy blackmail me. Do your worst. We won't be surrendering Jean like she's some prize. I heard a surprised scoff at the other end. I should have blackmailed you on that day, he said. I won't make the same mistake twice. The phone cut to Fury's voice. Dante threatened you with the internet. I'm threatening you with something that carries far more consequences, Fury said. Let us have that ticking time bomb, or I'll approach the president and show him how you treat your students. I felt dizzy in my chair. Decades of work gone overnight. All because of a single mistake. I set my jaw. All my bluster about loyalty and bravado went out the window when I considered the ramifications. The president could rescind the permit he gave me to house mutants without government supervision. The school could be disbanded because of this. Who would stop more radical lobbyists like Trask from getting funding for his extreme machines? Yet, that all paled compared to what else I stood to lose. Jean. She was like a daughter to me, and I'd be damned if I'd let some demon spawn or Firebird have her. Do what you have to do, Fury, I said, and I'll do what I have to. I swear to God, if you turn this planet into an apocalyptic wasteland because of your damn pride, death won't be able to keep me from you, Charles. Dante yelled into the phone and cut it. A nervous current ran up my spine as I set the phone away. Turning to the room, I saw them all looking at me with clear expectation. We need to talk about the elephant in the room. I was hungry for blood when the strike team's SUV rolled up to the mansion's gate. Xavier's specifically. Everybody else got a pass, but that didn't mean I planned to go easy on them. But I was saving all of my good stuff for Xavier and the Phoenix. Natasha had given me sonic grenades, flashbangs, and other practical weapons to deal with mutants whose primary mode of attack was their mind. We'd also come prepared with a lot more, but I didn't want to spoil you. We hoped to keep the fighting outside of the mansion because of the children, but when we laid eyes on the building, I realized it was never an option to begin with. Our collective jaws dropped when we saw the state of the mansion. Chunks of masonry hung in the air, and the mansion looked like it had withstood several earthquakes. I take it the party started without us, Coulson said somewhat nervously into his earpiece from his SUV. One car behind me. This was not in the reports, May said. Oh, it was most definitely not, Clint said in the chair beside me. The X-Men might be the ones who need protection if she can do that. You all heard what I told Fury, I said, muscling down the nervous twist I felt in my gut. Her powers are unprecedented and functionally limitless. Casually shattering a mansion and levitating the broken pieces are small potatoes for her. This belabors my earlier point. We need to approach her carefully. If Jean feels threatened, it's a wrap. Natasha, who was in the driver's seat, finally spoke. Fury's instructions were clear. Warm up the RX-29. I cringed at her persistence, but I didn't expect to talk Natasha out of following order in the first place. My words were for everybody else. Coulson and Clint, especially. They seemed the most flexible. Despite my sweet talking and arranging the meeting with Drum, the director did not change his mind about the nuclear option. Drum gave Fury nothing during their friendly conversation and said in so many words that their interests aligned. Fury had not been pleased, even after his assurances about the Arctic. Strap in, everyone, Natasha announced as she rammed the wrought iron gates for the mansion, entering the property properly. She sped through the property with ease, rapidly approaching the mansion. In front of the building stood the X-Men, and a few kids of the younger generation suited up for a fight. Scott, Colossus, Bobby Drake, Kitty Pryde, and even Pyro stood alongside the seasoned Wolverine and Storm. Hank was oddly absent, and the entire situation caused me to raise my brow. We stepped down from our cars in full tactical gear, with stun rifles set to medium. It was enough to disable most mutants, but mild enough not to cause lasting damage. Xavier is having children fight his battles now. I mused. I suppose that's no surprise. That has always been his MO, hasn't it? Manipulating people stronger and younger to do his dirty work. You're not welcome here, Aurora spoke with a commanding timbre. Take your associates and leave. And turn my back on Jean as you all have by supporting her abuser? I asked. I'm betting Xavier didn't tell you about the tape I recorded of our little chat. In case you were wondering, no, I didn't attack unprovoked. Xavier did. You messed with her head. Scott yelled from the side suddenly. You're the reason why she's lashing out. We were perfectly fine and happy until you came along. All of this is your fault. My fault. I scoffed. I'm not the one who thought it was a great idea to shackle whatever was in Jean's mind. Why don't you listen instead of running your mouth? I said, irritated, hitting the remote to the speaker system in our SUV. The speakers went on for about 2 seconds before Scott's laser cut through the engine and fried the car radio and speakers. My mouth fell open, and the other members of my team rapidly shifted and trained their guns on him. Damn it, kid. Wolverine unsheathed his claws, and the other X-Men shifted stances, getting battle ready. It's all lies anyway, Scott spat, eyes frantic. Touché, Xavier. I raised a hand to stay the firing order I knew was about to come from Natasha and let out an unhinged chuckle. Is this how you want to play this, Logan? You know I care about Jean. I can get her real help. More than anyone else. You should know I'm telling the truth. If I wanted Xavier dead, he'd be dead the second I entered his office. I can get her the help she needs. Doesn't matter if you want to help, Logan said. Those G-men behind you will cut her open and rip out everything that makes her human time and time again, if it means making a soldier like her. They're not her friends and certainly not yours either. I blinked. Logan just schooled me again. The government of the United States does not run experiments on its citizens. We're not World War II Nazis, Coulson spoke up. And we don't appreciate you calling us that. Of course you're not, Logan sniffed. Was in the war. The Nazis were 10 times scarier than your lot, but were simpler. At least you knew what you were in for. Boy Scouts like you don't even know how rotten their houses are. Coulson looked like he'd been punched in the throat, and Storm spoke, thankfully moving the conversation along. The professor has taken care of Jean most of her life. While some of us don't agree with his methods, we don't dispute that this mansion is the safest place in the world for her. I sighed, shaking my head. You're all so far out on the ledge, you don't even know. Xavier will get shredded if he pits himself against the Phoenix. And New York will be a crater the second that thing inside Jean gets loose. I know a sorcerer who can take her far away, deal with the fallout, and help her find herself again. She needs this, or I'm telling you, the planet will not survive. Logan didn't speak for a long moment. I think we're going to stick with the prof, kid, he said. I like you, but I don't trust a word that comes out of your mouth, even if it's always the truth. You tried, Natasha said, then turned to the lineup of mutants. To be clear, if you try to stop us, you will be seen as obstructing justice and will be charged to the fullest extent of the law. You don't scare me, Scott growled. Maybe she should, Clint said, shaking his head. We're not budging tuts, Wolverine growled, sinking into a deeper stance. Have it your way then, I said, then pulled a loaded sniper from my weapon vault and trained it at Wolverine's chest. He barely had time to blink before he was sent flying backward, with half his chest caved in. A fiery portal opened up behind him, sending Logan to somewhere in Ohio. Logan! Storm screamed, and Scott roared, firing a concentrated beam at me. Another portal opened in front of me, exiting out in the center of the X-Men. The explosions scattered them in different directions. Natasha and Clint were startled by the sudden development while Coulson gaped. When you said sorcerer, I didn't think you actually meant, well, that. Geek out later, I said. Save the world now. You heard the prickly teenager, Clint said. Let's end this quickly. His words spurred the team into action, and they each picked a mutant and went after them. Drum appeared behind me in his flowing gold robes. That was certainly some speech you gave back there. Good to have you here, Drum. Although we met under less than ideal circumstances, Drum struck me as reasonable. Now that our second biggest threat is taken care of, our focus needs to be her. I gestured towards Storm, who flew towards us with Colossus behind her. Bobby Drake faced off against Natasha. Pyro fought against Coulson and May, and Clint had the unfortunate pleasure of fighting Scott. Kitty was nowhere to be found, but that was largely expected. Drum observed the pair with some inquisitive tilt. The witch. She's overflowing with raw magical energy. I activated Devil's Eye, focusing on the energy surrounding Storm. Oh yeah, it's a crap ton, which is why I think you're best suited to handle this particular problem. I'm on Michelin Man. Drum gave me a blank stare. I guess they took your sense of humor along with your hair when they make you master. Huh? You do realize that we remain bald by choice? Once is an isolated incident, twice is a coincidence. And I don't believe in coincidences, Master Drum. He shook his head and waved his hand, generating 3 portals. 3 ethereal drums separated from the central one and flew into the portals surrounding Storm. It immediately halted her fight. Eldritch whips lashed out in mass, snapping up Storm's arms, legs, and torso. Do not resist, young witch, Drum said. We wish to help the girl, not kill her. Back on the ground, Colossus bounded into my range, and I angel evaded, appearing in front of the chrome giant. This is not going to go how you think it will, I said. I like Ileana. Don't make me fight you. You underestimate my strength, Piotr said. Do not forget you've never won any of our spars. I could have told him I was more focused on technique than power in those fights, but I thought it better to show him. Your funeral? I shrugged and Demon burst forward. Piotr crossed his arm to tank what he hoped would be a stab, but I switched to an axe mid-stride, packed it full of demon energy, and brought it down on Colossus's forearm. The hit rocked Colossus back, carving a deep rend in his forearm, and bathed it in fire. What the hell is that? His eyes bulged, looking down at his bruised forearm and Arbiter in dread. You sure you don't just want to let me through? I asked again. Colossus set his jaw and squared up his fists, and I rushed ahead, matching axe with fist. Natasha's POV, I fired electric shot after electric shot at the elusive Bobby Drake. His mutation gave me an innate advantage, making him highly susceptible to electricity. However, Drake was wily and skilled. After eating the first bolt to the chest, he lowered his ice shell and focused more on generating pillars to limit my eye line, making it harder to pin him down. In the background, Storm clouds gathered overhead, and I smelt ozone. Whatever that sorcerer was doing, he was not working fast enough to immobilize Storm. "You're a decent agent, lady," Bobby said smugly as he zipped past a pillar and chucked an icicle at me. "But I am an ex-man. You stand no chance. Why don't you round up your friends and get out of here while we're still being nice?" Like I said, Bobby was good for his age. I leaned out of the way of the icicle and pulled up my bullpup shotgun. One shot shattered an ice pillar, and the second nearly took off Bobby's head. He ducked under the shot, tucking and boosting himself behind another pillar. "Give up before I really start aiming." "You asked for it, lady," Bobby barked before a wave of frost swept the battlefield. The kid was getting serious. I supposed it was time I did too. I activated the internal heating in my suit and collapsed in an exaggerated heap and yelp. Bobby stopped, and I could hear his panicked footsteps race over. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!" More panic crept into Bobby's voice with repetition. I was lying on the ground some distance away, so I raised the voltage of my gun ever so slightly. When Bobby was about a dozen feet off, I switched off the heating and laid in wait, allowing a thin layer of frost to cover me. Bobby reminded me a lot about Dante. He might have been superhuman, but he was not truly strong. True strength came from conviction. "God, please," his voice cracked. Bobby did not have that, and neither did Dante. I fired straight into his chest just as he reached down to check on me. His eyes went wide in shock as his body seized. He tried summoning a layer of ice to protect him, but that only worsened things. After 5 long seconds, he dropped to the floor, completely passed out. With a huff, I climbed to my feet. It wouldn't be long before it was Dante lying at my feet. He thought he could manipulate me with the memory of my lost sister. I knew she was truly gone and made my peace with that. He was delusional if he thought he could compromise me, but I'll let him think he could and feed his ego. And when he's at his most vulnerable, that's when I'll strike. I'll pump him for all he's worth, just like I've done dozens of men before him. Fury had big plans for the kid, but he could not truly bring him in unless he knew where the kid buried his skeletons. I shook snowflakes out of my red hair before surveying the battlefield. Everyone had their fights in hand. The sorcerer had Storm on the ropes, and Coulson and May looked like they were about to turn their fight around with the pyrokinetic. Dante's fight with the giant was also heating up. Knowing the kid, it wouldn't be long before we were ready to storm the mansion. So, I took the time to update the director. Coulson Pyro, or whatever his name was, cackled like a berate villain as he set the grounds on fire. Wherever he pointed, flames roared, sending May and me scampering and sweating. Each time we took a shot at him, they melted mid-flight as Pyro cranked up the heat. Nearly a minute in, he was already a few fire waves away from burning down a quarter of the grounds, and we'd expended all 10 of our foam shots to extend the fight just a little bit longer. Dark clouds rolled in a while back, but nothing ever came of it. We saw bright flashes of red and gold, and in seconds it was over. Pyro was 3 moves away from asphyxiating us when May snapped. "Just let me switch to live ammunition, and I'll drop that bastard in a heartbeat," she growled. "And risk pissing off our director, 2 senior agents, and the devil kid?" I scoffed, wiping away a layer of sweat. "No, I have a better idea. One I think you'll like quite well." Pyro had a nasty habit of triggering our grenades mid-flight. I bet he wouldn't be able to do that if he was preoccupied by a murderous May. "Set your pieces to noise cancellation mode. Sonic grenades are about to go live," I announced on the channel, and everyone acknowledged the warning. The moment we set our earphones to full noise cancellation mode, I gave the signal. May opened fire on the smug mutant, targeting the general area around him. His eyes bulged as if surprised that we actually fought back. The sonic grenade went off a second later, and the wildfires around us quivered. Pyro fell to his knees, screaming, and May fired 2 electric shots into his chest. The fires around us sputtered and died when Pyro collapsed, and the grenade was spent a second later. "Did you really have to shoot the kid twice?" "They weren't high voltage," May waved. "And the rugrat deserved it." Clint, when Dante told me the professor was grooming Scott to take over the mutants, I started looking forward to the fight. Sure, he didn't make that great of a first impression. If I hadn't had the RX-29 on me, his teenage melodrama could have cost us the only reliable weapon we had to eliminate Jean should it come down to it. But I held out hope for the kid. Dante had praised his martial prowess, and he clearly held authority with the older generation despite his age. He couldn't have been that bad. I was disappointed when he opened his mouth. A bow and arrow, really? Are you sure you don't want to use that big rifle strapped to your back? At least your friends had the sense not to bring a 5th century weapon to a superhuman fight, he snickered. Has it occurred to you that there might be a reason why I use a bow? Scott scoffed, and I shook my head. A foam arrow left my bow before Scott could reach his visor. It coated his half-raised arm, nose, and visor in adhesive foam, neutralizing the git. Scott tumbled to the ground, yelling at the top of his lungs. He was so afraid it didn't even occur to him to try and breathe through his mouth. So I walked over and slapped the shit out of him. Breathe through your mouth before you pass out, kid. That snapped him out of his delirium, and he did as he was told, but not without getting a word in first. This is not over. Yeah, it is, I said as I stepped over him, turning my attention to Natasha. Her fight was heating up, as were the junior agents and the pyrokinetic kid. However, what truly held my attention was the dark clouds gathering above us. Storm, the weather control mutant, looked like she didn't appreciate Drum's advances one bit. With a shout, a burst of air swept through 2 of the 3 illusionary clones of the sorcerer, and I smelt ozone. She was about to bring lightning down on us. Not on my watch. I knocked another foam arrow, felt the wind with the tip of my finger, and fired. The arrow rode the air and slammed into the weather mutant's chest, wrapping her body tightly in foam. The last strings of golden restraints holding her suddenly faded instantly before red glowing bands shot out the adjacent portal and dragged her through. She yelped in surprise as she hit the floor. Lightning started to gather again before Drum crossed his hand, generating a prismatic shield around her, and looked at me. A knockout arrow, if you'd please. I blinked before answering. You got it, Chief. My arrow was airborne in a fraction of a second, and it penetrated through the prismatic prison, releasing a potent concoction that knocked out the mutant. Damn, I whistled. These sorcerers don't play around. Yet, I found him a lot less intimidating than the kid. The memory of him taking down that eldritch monster was still fresh. The explosions, the raw strength, and the killer instinct, it was all on display again in the fight with the big metal guy. Dante, the fight with Colossus started as a one-sided affair, but the big guy caught up pretty quickly. He avoided my axe like it was the plague, even when it wasn't overflowing with demonic energy, and always turtled up before I used burst in any capacity. But it didn't make that much of a difference. I was basically untouchable for somebody as slow as he was. For all his strength, Pyotr was not very fast. All it took was a wicked combo to bring him to his knees. I stepped into Pyotr's guard with 2 light burst-infused punches and weaved past the first jab that came at me and the feint that followed, setting me up for a brutal leg kick. I had picked up on his patterns a while back, but unlike most MMA fighters, I had the durability, speed, and reaction time to spot the deviations before they occurred. Although his muscles were all metal, I saw him pulling back as he set up the feint. I weaved under it to get a charge of demon evade double damage, and phased through a low kick as it came. Mid-air, I rapidly switched directions with a demonic burst and rebellion drawn. I spun in the air, body and blade, all the while filling up my weapon with demonic energy. The flat of Rebellion's blade slammed into the side of the big guy's head and sent him head over ass into a tree that subsequently snapped in half. I double jumped, reaching directly above him before going down full force with the blunt end of Arbiter's head soaked in demon energy. The sound of Pyotr's scream melded with the explosion. The hit created a small crater, yet the big guy came swinging a second later. The hit clipped me in the ear, and I flipped back and pulled Ebony. I started to charge a focused shot as he climbed out of the crater. He had a deep gash on his chest that made me wince. I could scarcely imagine how much worse the wound would have been if I had used the sharp edge. It's over, big guy, I said. Everyone is down except for you, and we will take them all into custody if you don't stop fighting me and let me help Jean already. You're not the man I thought you were, Dante. The professor said you brought this upon us, he said with a heavy breath, staring up at me. You tampered with the seal that he placed on the monster inside Jean. If y'all had been patient enough to listen to the damn tape, you would have heard me explain to Xavier that creating that seal was the worst thing he could have ever done. The monster inside of her is a thinking, feeling thing, and it doesn't like being shackled. I'm just here trying to fix Xavier's Mjolus up. Let us take her away and try and help her. Don't risk your and your sister's life out of loyalty to a man who doesn't deserve it. Colossus's eyes clouded over, and words followed, contemplative and slow. I Find you fascinating. His thick baritone voice was buried beneath a high-pitched tenor. But to my utter horror, his lips hadn't moved, but I'd heard it clearly all the same. He had breached my adept tier mental resistance skill without me ever noticing. My stomach dropped, and sweat broke out across my back and face. I was rooted in place by absolute terror, and then Colossus's body combusted. White and red fire poured out of his orifices and palms, knitting wounds that bled silver, revitalizing the waning giant. He grinned at me, and I made the mistake of activating Devil's Eye. A burning phoenix made of cosmic white fire floated, superimposed on Colossus's mind and body. The sheer presence of the beast burned through my retinas and touched my soul. I shrunk back. Shit. The sight reinforced my worst fears and brought me to that moment with Shin. The helplessness I felt, the primal fear that overwhelmed me. And just like then, there was nowhere to run. Yet, I wasn't the weakling I used to be, and I had people relying on me now. I couldn't entertain fear. Drum, send the fallen X-Men away and get the team into that mansion, I ordered through my comms. The Phoenix is here. Say no more, the man said. Talk to me, Dante. What's going on? Clint asked. Charles failed, I said plainly. The Phoenix is loose. Your only hope now is Drum. If he can get her the Arctic, maybe there's a chance. Chance of what? Coulson asked. Not dying a horrible death along with the rest of New York and the continent, Drum said evenly. Is that all? Clint's voice dripped with sarcasm. I'll hold off the big guy while you all make a break for the mansion, I said. You're the only one Jean trusts, Natasha pointed out. How are we supposed to get through to her? Was she being serious? I was about to fight the embodiment of psychic energy, life, and rebirth. The least she could do was have some damn initiative. You'll figure something out, I yelled. Now get on and move on. At those words, I finally fired the focused energy beam I'd been holding all this while. It carved a brutal path through the air and clapped against the waiting double palms of Colossus. The energy wavered for a moment before exploding violently. Phoenix Colossus stared at his burnt palm with some fascination before completely healing it with a flash of white fire. While the Phoenix was in a daze, Drum opened up glowing portals, ferrying every member of the team and the fallen X-Men deeper into the mansion. I breathed a little easier, but that was a mistake. When I turned back to the fight, Phoenix Colossus's fist was a few inches away from my face. I whipped out Osiris and swung it while channeling angel energy. Angelic energy bathed my scythe, generating a small arc that shoved back the Phoenix's fist. I didn't come out of the exchange unscathed either. The hit pushed me several meters back, and my bones ached, but I got a notification that made the entire exchange worth it. Angel technique. Parry, basic. Generate a wave of angel energy that reflects 50% of the damage inflicted and reduces the damage received by 65%. Cost 5 AE. Second to last chapter for the week. We're still off from the 1100 Power Stone goal for the week, but the double chapter is still locked in for Sunday. Anyhow, I just got this new review that really burned my chaps. I've gotten a few 2- and 1-star reviews from people who are salty about Dante being nerfed or not liking the X-Men taking Dante how they did. But something about this one really freaking got to me. The worst part is that his complaints were not even valid. They talked about how Dante made terrible decisions at every turn. And I'm not going to say his earlier decisions were not dog's hit. Choosing to raid the Santos Den could have gotten him killed, but everything after that was methodical. He went with the X-Men because they could kick his ass. He spares Xavier because he is a decent tool. He becomes a mercenary with Fury because he gets paid, has more freedom, and gets access to the stones. I mean, goddamn. I think above all else, Dante is more measured than the stereotypical protagonist. He can't act recklessly and stand up to people he can't take in a fight. And even when he does plan, things don't often work out in his favor. Cue Xavier nearly lobotomizing him. He's not just that guy. Dante is scrappy, duplicitous, and cares above his survival above looking good. And whoever says you can't play the long game. My new skill immediately went to work when Phoenix Colossus's fists came down for an overhead hit. I parried back the attack and followed with a shotgun blast to the face. Phoenix Colossus seemed more irritated than anything else and rushed me, beginning our battle in earnest. His blows came down like comets, and I sunk deeper into my skills, parrying, dodging with demon evade, and chaining axe strikes together. My hits shoved the Titan left and right, but it never seemed enough. Things kicked into high gear when Phoenix Colossus wrapped his fist with cosmic fire and swung at me. My eyes went wide, and I had to use a full-powered burst and leverage my considerable speed to gain distance. But even that was not enough. I chained it with Angel Evade in hopes of dodging the approaching destruction. But to my utter horror, the flame still touched me, splashing against my chest and left shoulder, throwing me out of Angel Evade. I spun out, bouncing on the ground, which had now been partially glassed over by fire, screaming my lungs out. Congratulations. You've unlocked Pain Resistance, Basic, grants a 15% reduced perception of all damage received. Costs 5 AEHR while in use. Congratulations. You've unlocked Fire Resistance, Basic, grants 15% resistance to all fire damage. Costs 5 DE per HR while in use. Really? Right freaking now. I tried rolling around, but that only spread the fire. Desperate, I tapped into my angel energy, Osiris materializing on my back, and focused on the wind affinity that came with the weapon. As usual, getting angel energy to do anything was exhausting, so I relinquished all control around my upper body and let the energy pour out of me. Blue-tinted wind escaped my pores, buffeting me wildly. It snuffed out the cosmic fire burning, and I collapsed to my knees, racked with indescribable pain. This was the worst I'd felt in both lives, and I knew things would only get worse from here. Angel regeneration flared to life, and it healed through all the scrapes and wounds, but halted when it came across my burns. The energy soothed me, but didn't do much else. Instead, I got a notification that made my heart drop. You've been inflicted by cosmic burn minus 15% health until fully healed. 420/630, a third of my health pool was gone just like that. To hell this. I was not dying over Shin's bullshit. I liked Colossus, but if it was me or him, I'd choose me. Damn this, I said coldly, summoning the sniper I'd used on Wolverine and fired from the hip. It clipped Colossus in the head, knocking him down and leaving him open for the 2 sonic grenades I armed and tossed. I flipped on the noise cancellation feature on my earpieces before they landed and stalked toward Colossus with a deep rage bubbling inside of me. I was saving the sonic grenade for Xavier and the Phoenix, but since it was right here in front of me. What the hell? Phoenix Colossus clamped its hands around his ears. I hefted the sniper rifle again and began to fill it with demonic energy. Activating my skill, Focus Shot. I felt the weapon heat and warp in my hand, but it remained stable enough for the 5 seconds it took to charge the shot. The bullet exploded forward like a beam of light and slammed into Colossus's chest, throwing him into the side of the mansion and rocking the entire structure. Metal skin or not, he would die if I kept riding him this hard, but I was checked out at this point. I discarded the heat-warped sniper rifle, hefted Arbiter, and started pouring demonic energy into the axe head. 5 seconds later, the axe head was scorching hot, yet I was not done. I activated Burst, packing the weapon with more energy. Arbiter lapped it up so quickly that I reached the 10 DE limit of the skill and continued to push. I felt an unseen muscle in my mind stretch and break, and demon energy flooded my veins. The tactical gear on me that survived the Phoenix fire started to warp and melt as heat poured out of every pore in my body. I got 2 more notifications. Congratulations. Demonic energy manipulation has reached Adept tier. Improved fine manipulation, damage, multitasking, and unlocks energy projection. Demonic technique. Burst has reached Adept tier. Permits user to stack 2 additional levels of burst onto an action or attack. Congratulations. You've learned demonic technique. Cloak, channel your inner devil and project a cloak made of demonic energy inspired by your affinity. Grants a 50% immunity to all fire. Improves the potency of demonic techniques by 25% and improves endurance and durability by 35%. Cost 50 DE to activate and 2 for every second used. A whirlwind of emotions and answers flooded me. I explained why new demon and angel skills were so difficult to gain. Energy projection and fine manipulation were Adept-level feats. The fresh skill also gave me the confidence I needed to continue this fight. I quickly checked my resources. HP, 420/620 SP, 450/610 DE, 301/450 AE, 320/420 Phoenix Colossus waded out of the rubble with a savage grin on its face. Show me more, it screeched as it waved its hand again, flooding the area with cosmic fire. But I was already in the air. The burst threw me up so fast that my mind struggled to keep up. I pushed my recently upgraded Adept tier manipulation skill, layering it on the bonus of my fire cloak, and swung my axe head, willing only the energy contained within it forward. Surprisingly, the axe head of Arbiter detached and flew forward in a crimson streak, leaving the handle in my hand. It cut through the cosmic fire and impacted the rapidly reacting Colossus. He looked like he was in the middle of redirecting his fire, but it was too late. The axe head impacted with the force of half a dozen grenades, and the cosmic fire ripping through the landscape winked out immediately. Arbiter's axe head materialized a moment later, and in the chaos below, I saw Phoenix Colossus standing proud with a deep scar across its chest. I winced at the sight. Colossus was a tough bastard, but a wound like that packed with demonic energy could take him out. He would die if the Phoenix did nothing about it. Still, it was him or me, and I refused to show weakness in front of the overgrown chicken. It could read my mind, and I did not want it to entertain the idea that it could hold Colossus or any of the other X-Men or S.H.I.E.L.D. agents as hostages. Doesn't feel very good, does it? I yelled as I landed across from it. More. In a flash, Colossus was on me with a flame-wreathed fist. I leaned out of the way, triggering Demon Evade, and laid into his wounded chest with a burst-boosted uppercut. Phoenix Colossus doubled over, wrenching blood, and looked up at me with surprise. My strength has reached the huge milestone of 40 since I started training at the S.H.I.E.L.D. facility. With the double damage bonus of Demon Evade, stacked with the outrageous damage amp of Cloak's 50% and a burst strike, I was punching with the force of near 150 strength. Absolutely disgusting. If not for my boosted endurance, I was sure I would have crippled myself with that hit alone. In retrospect, that shot with Arbiter was probably powerful enough to cleave a car in half. I was getting up there. I grinned ear to ear despite the pain. I couldn't wait to get my hands on Eric's. The flame died down as Colossus stepped out, his chrome skin fully repaired. The very tips of his fists burned white-hot with cosmic fire, and he looked noticeably fatigued despite just getting a cosmic pick-me-up. I raised my brow and used Devil's Eye. The Phoenix's presence was a tenth of its former size and flickering. I couldn't believe it. The bird was running out of juice? Clint Drum's portal dumped us in the bowels of the castle, and everyone save for Drum had their rifles raised with their torches on. Sure, all of the fighters had come out to meet us, but it paid to be paranoid in our line of work. 10 seconds passed as we scattered, scanning the perimeter before we converged. Perimeter secure, I announced, then turned to Drum. The other mutants? Safe on an inaccessible portion of the roof, he said. They're stuck even if they somehow manage to get out of their restraint. Clint, great work, Drum, I said. And the kid? A few halls down, Drum answered. Prepare for the worst, but don't be overeager. We're treading very dangerous waters here. Roger, I nodded, gingerly setting down my duffel bag and pulling out the rifle. It was sleek and long, made with some of the rarest metals on Earth, all to accommodate a bullet that should not exist. Is that the... Coulson spoke up with a hint of excitement and trepidation. Yup. I've heard the rumors, but never imagined I'd lay eyes on the real deal, he muttered. The bullet was fashioned from the remains of a recovered Tesseract storage cell from World War II. Only 3 bullets were ever made, 2 of which had been used to eliminate targets previously thought unkillable. The bullets did not move particularly fast. No faster than any other sniper rifle bullet, but something about it allowed it to rip through most surfaces and substances when accelerated to certain speeds. Fury hoped it would do the same to Jean Grey if it ever came to that, though I was supposed to make a phone call to him before that. Natasha had updated Fury after her fight with Bobby. Weapons live and set to the highest level, Natasha announced, but don't point at her. Let me do the talking. If anyone knew what went on inside the mind of a teenage girl, it would be Natasha. This will likely be the hardest thing you ever do, I said slowly. So don't, watch out. I spotted him too late. A blue-haired blur leaped into the hallway, claws stretched, swinging. Drum spun around to cast his strange magic, but it was too late for May. The blur's claws slapped her hard into the wall. She fell to the ground, limp and bleeding from a gash to the side of her head. May. Coulson absolutely lost it, unloading stun rounds into the beast, but he only roared in faint protest and charged forward anyway. I pulled my bow and fired a foam arrow at him, but he leaped into the air, latching onto the ceiling with his claws, continuing his charge at us. Red fiery whips lashed out next, restraining and yanking down the beast. He landed with a loud thump. We pointed our guns at him, ready to fire, but then I recognized him. Dr. Hank. As in Dr. Hank McCoy? Natasha asked, lowering her gun. Coulson seemed satisfied that the beast was sufficiently incapacitated and rushed to May's side. The beast snarled at us through his binds, but he struggled to break out of it. He's hard to place underneath all that savagery. But yeah, it's him. Hank McCoy was the mild-mannered inventor of Charles Xavier's little team. There were rumors that he could throw down. Since he never made a habit of it, there'd been some doubts, but his little demonstration earlier cleared all of it. What's wrong with him? Natasha asked. Drum frowned and generated a strange fractal with a single hand. He's been brainwashed. The professor or the monster? I asked. This is Xavier's touch, Drum answered as he pressed his spell against Hank's head. He must be truly desperate. The change was instant. Hank gasped, his yellow eyes wide with terror. He desperately searched our faces. How did I get here? Peace, Drum said. Your mind was overtaken by another. Xavier, Hank said with a heavy voice. I can't believe, after everything, how could he? What's going on in there, Doc? I asked. Can you give us a heads up? Hank's eyes glazed over as he lost himself in thought. The last thing I remember was Jean shredding her restraints. She left the med bay, dragging Charles along with her. He said something to me, and everything turned black. I'm beginning to get why the kid hates the old man, Coulson chipped in, even as he held May close. He cradled her in his arms, and Natasha joined, assessing the full extent of her injuries. She produced some bandages from one of her pouches and wrapped it around May's head. He's rotten all right, I said, but Fury wants him alive, preferably strong enough to stand trial for his crimes. Chum for the ravenous public, Drum surmised. DC will need somebody to pin this entire mess on when all this is over, I said. Fury had to explain the ruined mansion and whatever else followed. This will be the end of us, Hank muttered dejectedly, and he was right. Not if you step up, I said. You have almost as many credentials as the bald old guy, and are considerably less creepy. Thank you. Normal mutant folk needed a spokesperson for them. Now more than ever. The fallout from this would be catastrophic. Charles's actions were about to set their movement back several decades at least. Mutant fear was about to reach an all-new height. With somebody as level-headed as Hank at the lead, at least they stood a chance. I don't exactly have the face for politics, Hank said. He was right there. Nothing a simple glamour can't fix, Drum said. Hank seemed to perk up at that, but for the wrong reasons entirely. How does that work exactly? Hard light or some strange hallucinogenics? Drum smiled as he slowly released the binding spell. We will get into all that later. For now, we need to get you somewhere safe. Your mind is still fragile. We can't let you stay. Hank winced, looking at May, then remained determined. I can't leave yet, not without finding Ileana. She's the sister to Colossus, and I just got a call from Kitty Pryde. She apparently teleported when she heard that Dante was fighting her brother. You think she could be here? Natasha asked. That's what I'm afraid of. I sighed, rubbing my forehead, as if we didn't have enough to deal with already. Suddenly, we heard a crash, and the entire mansion shook. We all braced for a long moment while chunks of stone rained down and paintings crashed to the floor. The mansion did not stop shaking for an entire minute. When it finally stopped, I spoke. That is why we can't let you stay. You're not only vulnerable to Charles anymore. Whatever that thing was that possessed Jean, it's free now. It already took Colossus, and I'm betting the other X-Men are not far behind. Dante thinks our best chance of survival is to get that thing as far away from civilized society as we can, I said. I'm sorry about Ileana, but everything is secondary to saving the planet now. Dante is fighting that thing tooth and nail, and as much as I like the kid, I don't like his chances. Hank's eyes went wide. I see. Promise me you'll look for her then, after all of this. We can't lose both Ileana and her brother to this thing. You have my word, I nodded, glad he hadn't put up much of a fuss. I'll be sending you to the Sanctum, along with the rest of the X-Men. Inform them of the situation, Drum said as he looped his hand, generating a fiery golden portal. And offer the witch my apologies. Drum swept his hand forward, and Colossus vanished before our very eyes. But the stoic man made a confused face that immediately put me on alert. What's wrong? The witch, she escaped. We can't go after her, Natasha said, and I agreed. Call the director and give him an update, I said. We've put this off long enough. Let's end this. Ileana, minutes after the mansion shook and strange cracks appeared, Auntie Moira showed up. She came with a few buses and men in suits. For the first time since I met her, she did not take her time to hug me and talk to Bunny. She and the professor looked worried, so I snooped, peeking into the med bay through a half-closed door. How could you let this happen, Charles? Auntie Moira hissed. Trying to kill a kid? He was no kid or human, Moira. He caused this. Jean is in bed because of him. If he'd just let things alone. The professor seemed to grow more tired with every word. I messed up, Moira, and I'm not sure if I can fix things, he said, but I have to try. I beg you, keep the children safe. I can't lose them. I won't let them pay for my mistake. Ani hugged him, and I felt so sad that it hurt. I leaned deeper into the open door. The professor was covered in sweat and blood. I pulled Bunny in closer as my eyes started to water, and behind me, I felt a tap. I jumped, yelping, only to turn around to find Kitty smiling down at me. Her smile disappeared when she saw my teary face, and she pulled me close as the tears started to pour. Professor and Aunt Jeannie, I said in between hiccups. I'm so sorry for scaring you, she apologized. Everything will be okay. I promise. We're just going away for a minute. We'll be back before you know it. But Big Brother Pyotr, we'll be fine, she said. He's the toughest dude on the roster. If anyone's going to stop the government cronies, it's him. Why is the government attacking us? I blinked, looking up at her. She made a face an adult did when I asked them questions they didn't want to answer. It's pretty complicated. How? Kitty's face grew even more conflicted. Just as she opened her mouth to answer, Auntie Moira stepped out of the med bay. I could see the relief on Kitty's face. What are you doing here, Ileana? She swept me up in her arms and smiled at me, but I saw the fear she was trying to hide. Your Auntie Moira is taking you and the rest of the kids on a special trip into town. We'll have lots of treats and fun. What do you say, Illy? I frowned. I don't want to be separated from Big Brother Pyotr again. The last time the government came for us, I didn't see him for months. That won't happen, Moira promised. We'll get all this sorted out before you know it. Besides, the big guy won't be able to let loose if he's worried sick about you, Kitty said, throwing an enthusiastic fist. I want to stay behind and help out too, but you guys need me more, she said, rubbing my head. I wasn't happy about it, but I understood. Moira was a grown-up whom the professor trusted, so I knew I could trust her too. Kitty was not quite a grown-up, but she has always been nice to me and Pyotr. If she said he needed me safe, then I would leave for his sake. I pouted for a bit before I looked up at Kitty, and then Moira. Can I bring Bunny's sister Floppy? Kitty and Moira seemed to freeze over before bursting out laughing. What? I asked, genuinely confused. They didn't stop laughing for a while.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.